Hey guys, welcome back to another slow night of cozy curiosity. If you're listening in bed, lights dimmed, maybe the fan humming softly beside you, or perhaps you're curled up on the couch with a cup of something warm. Wherever you are, I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, we're going to wander into one of the most quietly powerful mysteries of the human mind: memory. How does your brain take fleeting moments and turn them into lifelong impressions? Why do some memories fade like morning fog while others stay crisp for decades? And have you ever wondered if your memories are telling the whole truth? If that sounds like a journey you're ready to take, feel free to like this video, subscribe for more quiet explorations, or drop a comment sharing your strangest memory. You know, the one that never quite made sense. All right, take a deep breath. Let the room settle. Let's step gently into the science of remembering and forgetting. All right. Lights down low, blanket tucked in just right. Maybe you've got the fan spinning gently or some soft night sounds purring in the background. If you're listening with your eyes already getting a little heavy, that's okay. Tonight's journey doesn't require you to take notes. Just drift along with me, like a slow canoe ride down a calm river of thoughts. We're talking about memory. Not the kind that's stored in hard drives or on sticky notes plastered to the fridge. I mean your memory, the invisible theater inside your head where scenes from your life are played back on a loop, sometimes faithfully, sometimes hilariously out of order. Let me ask you, what's the very first memory you can recall? Like, really remember? Maybe it's a smell your grandmother's cooking, or the damp wood of a cabin after the rain. Maybe it's a blur of playground colors or the jolt of a scraped knee. And maybe you're not even sure if it's a real memory or just a story someone told you so many times that your brain decided to own it. Don't worry, that's normal. Memory is slippery like that. It's not a filing cabinet. It's more like a foggy stage where different actors, your senses, your emotions, your attention span, are constantly ad-libbing. And your brain. Well, your brain is the director, the camera crew, the lighting guy, and the clumsy intern who sometimes trips over the cables and deletes the whole scene. Tonight, we're going to explore how all that works. Gently, of course. No pop quizzes, just a cozy tour of how the brain captures, stores, and sometimes just lets things go. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Scientists don't entirely agree on what memory even is. Oh, they agree that it's a function of the brain, sure, but when it comes to the how, the details get fuzzy. That's because memory isn't located in one neat spot like a drawer in a kitchen. It's everywhere. It's an orchestra spread across the brain's regions, playing together in imperfect harmony. Let's take a slow stroll through this orchestra. Imagine a moment, any moment. Let's say your birthday. A candlelit cake, the hum of happy birthday someone's off key, singing, the smell of frosting, the flicker of a match. Your brain doesn't store that moment like a video. It breaks it up: sound here, smell there, emotion in one corner, the visual flash in another. And later, when you remember it, your brain reassembles all those puzzle pieces into something that feels like a memory. It's like rebuilding a house from the original blueprint, except some of the bricks have wandered off, and your brain fills in the gaps with its best guesses. And sometimes it just makes stuff up. Not to lie, just to keep the story flowing. But let's rewind even further, before the cake, before the puzzle pieces. How does something even become a memory? It starts with attention. Your brain is constantly bombarded with input, millions of sensory signals per second. Most of it you ignore. You don't remember what color socks you wore last Thursday. But if something feels important, emotionally charged, surprising new, your brain says, aha, this might be worth keeping. Like a security camera suddenly deciding, okay, now I'm recording. That's called encoding. It's the first step in the memory process. Encoding is when your brain translates what you're experiencing into a language it understands, usually as patterns of neural activity. And once it's encoded, the real magic begins. The memory travels through your brain's postal service with one particularly busy hub, the hippocampus. It's like the customs office of memory. If it stamps a memory as approved, it moves on for longer storage. If not well, it might just drift away like mist on a morning lake. The hippocampus is picky. It likes memories that come with emotional flair. That's why you remember the first time you fell in love, or the time you embarrassed yourself in front of the entire class, but not say what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago. It's not that your brain can't remember, it's just that it chooses not to waste precious real estate. But here's something even more fascinating. Your memories aren't just stored for replay. They shape your behavior. They guide your expectations. They build your sense of identity. You are, in many ways, the story your brain tells about what has happened to you. And that story, it changes. Not just because your memory fades, but because every time you recall a memory, you change it just a little. Like rereading a book and underlining different lines each time. That's called reconsolidation, and we'll talk more about it soon. But for now, just know this. Memory isn't a static archive. It's alive, dynamic, malleable. It breathes with you. So, why does this matter? Because understanding how memory works helps us understand everything else. Learning, trauma, relationships, even happiness. Think about it: without memory, there is no continuity, no growth, no you. So as we drift deeper into this series, we're going to untangle how memory types differ, how sleep weaves memory stronger, how forgetting works and why it's often a gift, and how your brain sometimes tricks you into remembering things that never actually happened. But tonight, just rest in. In this, your brain is a story maker, a time-traveling narrator, a dream director with a wildly creative streak, and the memories you carry. They're not just echoes, they're threads connecting your present to every version of yourself you've ever been. Take a breath, let it settle. We're just getting started, and trust me, your brain has a lot more stories to tell. Okay. Still with me. Maybe you're lying on your side now, one arm under the pillow, the other holding your phone, just loosely enough that it might drop in a minute or two. That's totally fine. This is the kind of story you can drift in and out of, like soft waves washing over you on a moonlit beach. No rush, no pressure. So let's pick up from where we left off. Your brain, that quiet narrator, doesn't just store memories as one big pile of stuff. It's more organized than that, surprisingly so, actually. Memory comes in different forms, and each type plays a very specific role in the story of your mind. Think of them like different drawers in the same wooden chest. You open one for short-term details, another for your deepest life experiences, and yet another for the time you accidentally sang the wrong lyrics in front of your crush. Yeah, that one's still in there. The most basic distinction: short-term, long-term, and working memory. But let's not treat this like a textbook. Let's take it slow. Imagine your brain as a cozy little cabin in the woods. On the kitchen table, you've got a notepad that's your working memory. It's where you scribble things you need right now, a phone number someone just told you, the next step in a recipe, the reason you walked into a room and then forgot. Working memory is small, really small. Most people can only hold around 7 things in it at once. Some lucky ones can stretch to 9. Others, well, 4 is a good day. It's fragile, easily distracted, like trying to balance 5 marbles on a spoon while someone tells you a joke. Drop one thought, and poof, gone. Now, off to the side of the cabin is a hallway with 2 doors. Behind one is your short-term memory. It's a little more stable than that notepad. This room holds onto things for a few seconds to a minute. The name of the person you were just introduced to. The code your coworker whispered to you as they walked past. These memories are temporary guests. They drop by, sip some tea, and usually leave before the kettle boils, unless, of course, you really focus on them. Then they might move into the other room, the long-term memory. Ah, yes, long-term memory. The attic filled with everything from your childhood bike to the lyrics of that one commercial jingle you wish you could forget. This attic is vast, almost endless. You store not only facts and dates, but also how to ride a bicycle, how you felt during your first heartbreak, and maybe even the smell of your grandfather's cologne. But long-term memory isn't just one giant trunk. It's divided, too. Let's unpack it together. First, there's explicit memory, also called declarative memory. This is the kind of memory you can talk about. Things you know you know. It splits into two parts. Episodic memory. Memories of events like your last birthday party, the day your cat gave birth on your pillow, or the time you got caught singing in the shower. These are stories. They come with emotion setting and often way more detail than you'd expect. Semantic memory. General knowledge, facts, trivia, like the capital of France or how many legs a spider has. You probably don't remember learning it, but you just know. That's semantic memory at work. Then there's implicit memory, the memory you don't even realize you're using. It's automatic, like muscle memory. Ever driven home and realized you don't remember the last 5 minutes of the road? That's implicit memory taking the wheel. It includes procedural memory, how to do things, riding a bike, typing without looking, tying your shoelaces. This kind of memory sticks like glue. Once it's in, it rarely fades, even if you haven't ridden a bike in years. Emotional conditioning, the way your body reacts without thinking, like flinching at the sound of thunder if you once had a scary storm experience as a child. Now, there's also autobiographical memory, a beautiful mix of episodic and semantic memory. It's the you memory, your story, your timeline. You don't just remember what happened, you remember what it meant to you. This is the voice that says, I was always shy in school, or that summer changed everything. Autobiographical memory is how we maintain our identity over time. It's how we know we are us. And here's the funny part. You use all of these memory systems without even trying. They just work like an invisible orchestra playing quietly behind the scenes while you go about your day. Sometimes they play in harmony. Sometimes they forget the sheet music. But they're always playing. Let's not forget another fascinating type of prospective memory. It's your brain's way of reminding you to do things in the future, like remembering to take the laundry out, or call your friend back, or feed the cat before she gives you the death glare. Prospective memory is like a sticky note your brain tries to pin on itself, except sometimes it blows away. That's why you walk into the kitchen and say, "Why did I come in here again?" So yes, memory is not one thing, it's a family of processes, each with a role, a rhythm, and a personality. Some are loud and vivid, others are shy and silent, and some like that one time in middle school that still makes you cringe. They're just stubborn. You may not be able to control what your brain decides to keep, but knowing how it works, this gentle, layered system, can help you be a little more patient with yourself, a little more forgiving when the name is on the tip of your tongue or the keys are mysteriously in the fridge again. Memory isn't perfect, but it's beautifully human. A quiet patchwork quilt stitched together by attention, emotion, experience, and time. Next time, we'll peek into how your brain begins that delicate process of turning fleeting moments into encoded signals, how it decides what to remember and what to let go. But for now, just let all this settle like dust in a sunbeam. You don't need to remember it all. Your brain will do its thing. You just rest. We're only just getting started. So, you're still here. That's nice. Maybe your eyes are just a little heavier than they were 10 minutes ago. Maybe your blanket feels warmer or your mind is floating between words and dreams. That's okay. Tonight you don't have to hold on to every sentence. You're allowed to drift. This is the kind of story your brain can sip slowly, like warm tea for the mind. In our last talk, we gently opened the drawers of memory. Tonight, we're going to follow the path a memory takes once your brain decides, yes, this moment is worth keeping. It's not as simple as clicking save. It's more like bottling lightning, fleeting electric, and surprisingly beautiful when you slow it down. So, let's begin at the beginning. Imagine your brain as a sprawling, softly lit library. Not one with hushed whispers and strict librarians, but a living, humming place, like 1,000 tiny bookshops hidden behind your eyes. Every experience you have, a scent, a smile, a sudden thought is like a spark that sets a chain reaction in motion. That chain begins with your senses. You see something, hear something, feel something. That raw data light waves, sound vibrations, a touch on your skin rushes into your brain like guests arriving at a party. They pour into a wide hallway called the sensory cortex where they're sorted quickly, almost instinctively. Sight to the occipital lobe, sound to the temporal lobe, touch to the parietal. Your brain doesn't just receive information, it categorizes it like placing puzzle pieces on the right part of the table before the picture comes together. But here's where it gets interesting. That sensory input, it doesn't become a memory on its own. It needs to be noticed. That's where attention comes in. Attention is like a spotlight choosing which guests get to stay at the party. Without it, most experiences slip quietly through the back door, never stored, never remembered. You probably don't recall what shirt your coworker wore yesterday unless something about it caught your eye. A mustard stain, perhaps, or sequins. Sequins always make the cut. Once something has your attention, your brain begins encoding. This is the process of transforming experience into data, something the brain can store and retrieve. But encoding isn't one size fits all. It can be shallow, just noting a word's sound, or deep, like attaching meaning or emotion to the moment. The deeper the encoding, the stronger the memory. That's why stories, feelings, or unexpected events stick far better than dry lists of facts. Now, where does this encoded data go? Enter the hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure nestled deep in the temporal lobe. Don't let its size fool you. It's one of the busiest places in your entire brain. Like a meticulous librarian, the hippocampus reviews incoming information and decides where it should live. It doesn't store the memories forever, but it acts as the sorting office, tagging and indexing them before passing them on for long-term storage. Some memories, especially emotionally charged ones, get VIP treatment. That's because the hippocampus works closely with the amygdala, the brain's emotional center. If the memory is tied to strong emotions, joy, fear, heartbreak, the amygdala boosts the signal. It's like telling the librarian, hey, this one matters. Don't lose it. That's why you remember where you were during big emotional events, and not where you put your socks this morning. Once encoded, the memory takes a winding path through the brain's neural network. It's not placed in one neat drawer. No, your memory is scattered like fragments of stained glass spread across the brain. The sound of laughter, stored in the auditory cortex. The smell of cinnamon buns, nestled in the olfactory bulb. The image of your friend's smile, held by the visual cortex. And your emotional reaction to it all, safely nestled in deeper, older brain regions. To retrieve the memory later, your brain has to reassemble it, pulling these pieces back together like a jigsaw puzzle. And here's the catch: every time you remember something, the puzzle changes just a bit. You reinforce some connections, weaken others, maybe even add a piece that wasn't there the first time. Memory is less like a photograph and more like a watercolor painting, soft, changing, and influenced by every time you look at it. And here's another twist. Memories need consolidation to stick. That's a fancy word for the brain taking short-term memories and transferring them into long-term storage. And guess when that happens most effectively? While you sleep. Yes, while you're dreaming, snoring, or lying quietly in that half-lucid state before sleep, your brain is busily reviewing the day's events, deciding what to keep and what to let fade. It replays experiences, strengthens connections, and files things away like a night shift librarian whispering through the stacks. That's why good sleep boosts learning, and sleep deprivation makes your brain feel like a fogged-up mirror. Memories also depend on repetition. Think of the brain like a forest trail. The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes. Neural pathways are the same. Recalling a memory, reflecting on it, telling it as a story, all of that strengthens the trail. Leave it untouched, and nature, well, forgetfulness starts to take it back. But the process isn't flawless. Distractions, stress, trauma, or just the sheer volume of input can disrupt encoding. The hippocampus may misfile a memory. The neural links may fade. You may only retrieve part of the memory or blend it with another. That's why memories sometimes feel like dreams, or why siblings remember the same event in completely different ways. Their brains told the story differently. Neither is lying. They just filed the day under different emotions angles and spotlighted details. So, to store a memory, your brain must sense it, pay attention, encode it. Root it via the hippocampus. Consolidate it during rest. Strengthen it over time through retrieval. It's a lot of steps, and yet it happens constantly without effort. As you lie here now, maybe remembering your day, your brain is storing some of this very moment. Maybe the sound of my voice, maybe a thought that popped up while you were half listening, maybe even the feeling of calm you're beginning to settle into. And that's beautiful. Because even if you forget this exact episode tomorrow, the feeling might stay. A softness, a quiet stretch of mental space where something felt understood, if only for a moment. So next time you remember something random, something vivid, something strange, know that behind that recollection lies a symphony of cells, chemistry, and connections. Your brain, like an ancient library lit by fireflies, working its silent, sacred craft. Take another breath. Let it go. The memory of this night is already being written. So, here we are again. You're still with me, maybe curled a little deeper into the blankets now. The room quieter. The world a little dimmer. That gentle hum maybe from your fan, or just the low buzz of nighttime stillness, is the perfect backdrop for what we're about to explore. A small curled structure deep in your brain, soft as a seahorse, yet powerful enough to hold the keys to almost everything you remember. Tonight, let's visit the hippocampus. Now, don't let the name scare you. It sounds like a mythical creature, a hippo attending university, maybe. But really, it's one of the oldest, most essential structures in your brain. And if your memories were male tiny letters written by experience, sealed with emotion, then the hippocampus would be the post office, quietly sorting, stamping, and deciding where everything goes. Picture it like this. You walk through your day collecting moments, little packages of sight, sound, touch, feeling, the smell of your coffee, a text from a friend. The sudden sting of stepping on a Lego, which, let's be honest, is a pain science still hasn't fully explained. Each of these moments is raw data. Before they become memories, they need to be processed, organized, and routed. That's what the hippocampus does tirelessly, constantly, without ever asking for credit. It lives tucked away in the medial temporal lobe, one on each side of your brain, like twin curled messengers. When something important happens, and remember important can mean emotional, novel, surprising, or even just repeated, the hippocampus perks up. It starts weaving threads from all over your brain, the sound from the auditory cortex, the visuals from the occipital lobe, the feelings from your limbic system. It gathers these scattered puzzle pieces, holds them together just long enough, and gently places the assembled memory into long-term storage. But here's the beautiful paradox. The hippocampus doesn't store your memories forever. It's more like a transfer station. For a while, days, weeks, sometimes months, it holds onto the memories like a parent teaching a child to ride a bike. Then when the memory is stable enough, the hippocampus lets go. It hands the training wheels to the neocortex and says, "All right, this one's ready. You can keep it now." Think of it as temporary custody. Without the hippocampus, memories don't make the leap from fleeting experience to lasting impression. That's why damage to this area, through injury, illness, or aging, can make it incredibly difficult to form new memories. The camera might still be rolling, but the film never develops. In fact, one of the most famous cases in neuroscience revolves around this idea. A patient known as HM, who had his hippocampi surgically removed to treat severe epilepsy, lost the ability to form new long-term memories. He could remember everything up until the surgery, but after that, each new day was a blank slate. He could hold a conversation, laugh at a joke, even learn new motor skills. But ask him an hour later what he had done, and there'd be nothing. Just silence. As if the day had never happened. It's haunting. But it also showed scientists something incredible, that different types of memory live in different places. HM couldn't form episodic memories, the stories of daily life, but he could still learn procedures like tracing shapes in a mirror. That meant his procedural memory was intact, just hidden somewhere else. It was a groundbreaking discovery, whispered by the absence of what HM could no longer recall. Now let's zoom back into your brain right now. Maybe earlier today you tasted something that reminded you of your grandmother's house. A memory seemingly out of nowhere swam up from the deep. That's because the hippocampus stores memories with context. It links things together, smells with places, feelings with faces, moments with meaning. It's a master of association. It also works hand in hand with the amygdala, the brain's emotion center. When something intense happens, something joyful, terrifying, heartbreaking, the amygdala taps the hippocampus on the shoulder and says, "This one's important." And the hippocampus listens. That's why emotionally charged memories burn brighter and last longer. The brain wants us to remember what moved us or what threatened us. But here's something gentle and human about this little structure. The hippocampus is also sensitive to stress. Chronic stress, anxiety, or trauma can shrink it. That means during hard times, the memory sorting machinery can falter. It may misfile or skip storage entirely. That's why stressful periods often feel blurry or fragmented when we look back. The mailroom was overwhelmed. The packages didn't get sorted. On the other hand, activities like meditation, sleep exercise, and deep learning, they help nourish the hippocampus, grow new neurons, sharpen its abilities. Think of it as clearing the cluttered desk, opening a window, and letting in some quiet air so the librarian can work again. So, now you know. When you remember your childhood home, or what you did last weekend, or how to play that one song on piano, you're not just recalling. You're tracing a path through a structure that's been stitching your life together one moment at a time. The hippocampus isn't flashy, it's not poetic or dramatic, but it is faithful, quiet, tireless, like a monk transcribing pages in the candlelit corner of your mind. And as we speak, even now, it's doing its work, deciding which part of tonight's story might be worth holding on to. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the words melt into that soft hum around you. Your hippocampus will handle the rest. You're still with me. That's comforting. Maybe you're lying flat now, phone balanced on your chest, earbuds soft against your ears. Or maybe you're only half listening, and that's okay too. This part of the journey is meant to drift in and out, just like the kind of memory we're going to talk about tonight. Sensory memory. It's the first faint breath of memory, the part that greets experience before your conscious mind even knows it's there. Think of it as the morning mist that clings to everything before the sun rises. It's delicate, fleeting, and yet without it, nothing else can happen. Let's set the scene. You walk into a room. The light flickers. A breeze touches your skin. There's a whiff of something coffee, maybe, or that strange, slightly dusty smell of an old book on a wooden shelf. Someone nearby laughs. A chair scrapes. Your footstep echoes against the floor. All of that. It arrives at once. A flood, a waterfall of sensation. And before your brain can say, "Oh, I'm here. This is real. I'm in a room," the sensory memory system has already caught it, just for a moment. Sensory memory is like a soft net catching the raw input of the world for a fraction of a second before deciding whether to keep it. And we do mean a fraction. We're talking milliseconds here, maybe 1 second too at most. After that, unless something about the moment gets flagged by attention, by emotion, by novelty, it vanishes, evaporates, like breath on a mirror. But in that tiny window of time, a lot happens. Scientists typically divide sensory memory into 3 main types based on the senses it serves. First, there's iconic memory. That's your visual sensory memory. The reason you still see a lightning flash a moment after it's gone. The afterimage that lingers when you close your eyes after looking at something bright. Iconic memory lasts about half a second, just long enough for your brain to register what the eyes just saw. It's the mental version of a photographic flash, quick, precise, and gone before you know it. Then there's echoic memory. This one belongs to your ears, and it's longer. Sound, after all, takes time to unfold. Think about when someone says something and you say, "What?" But then you answer them anyway because the words suddenly catch up to you. That's echoic memory at work. It holds sounds in your mental buffer for 3 to 4 seconds, enough time for your brain to rewind the tape and press play again. And then there's haptic memory, your sense of touch, the faint trace of a warm mug after you've set it down, the ghost of pressure left on your skin. Haptic memory is less understood, but it too gives your brain just enough time to decide, was that something important or just background noise? The thing about sensory memory is, it's not really under your control. It's not something you can train or flex like a muscle. It's automatic, reflexive. It's the reason a sudden movement makes you flinch or a loud noise makes your heart jump. Your brain doesn't wait to think. It registers, first reacts second, and reflects, maybe, much later. But what sensory memory does best, what it was built for, is filtering. Imagine standing in a rainforest. There are 1,000 sounds, insects, birds' distant thunder, dripping leaves. You don't remember each one. You're not meant to. Instead, your brain uses sensory memory to capture everything, just long enough to ask, is this something I need to pay attention to? If yes, it passes it along up the chain into working memory, into consciousness, and possibly, if it sticks around, into long-term memory. If not, it's discarded, forgotten. And that's actually a gift, because if you remembered everything, your mind would be overwhelmed. Life would become unbearable noise. The blur of every passing face, every shifting shadow, every subtle shift in breeze and scent and light, it would crowd your thoughts like static. So your brain built a gatekeeper, a system that listens quietly, notes quietly, and then lets go. Now, let's bring this closer to home. Imagine you're sitting by a window at dusk. A car passes. There's the low whoosh of tires on wet pavement. You feel a slight draft brush your arm. A light flickers across the wall. You blink. A second later, it's all gone. But for a brief heartbeat, you caught it. You held it. That was your sensory memory doing its quiet work. And it's still doing it even now. As you listen to this, the sound of my voice, the texture of the air, the feeling of the pillow beneath your cheek, it's all being noticed, even if it never becomes something you'll recall tomorrow. Not all memories are meant to last. Some exist just long enough to tell your brain, we're here. This is real. Sensory memory is the threshold, the first kiss of awareness, the whisper before the word. It's not about holding on, it's about being present, fully, briefly, beautifully. So, as we end tonight's chapter, I'd invite you to listen just a little deeper. Not to me, but to what's around you. The quiet click of your ceiling fan, the creak of your house settling, the softness of your own breath. Your sensory memory is catching it all right now, even if only for a moment. Close your eyes, let it fade. Tomorrow we'll wander deeper into the moving, flickering space of working memory. But for now, let it go. The mist has done its job. Sweet dreams, gentle traveler. Hey, you're back. Or maybe you never left. Maybe you're somewhere between waking and dreaming, where the world softens at the edges and thoughts don't need to make perfect sense. That's a good place to be. Because tonight we're stepping into a space inside your mind that's constantly in motion, fleeting, fragile, and yet essential to almost everything you do. Working memory. If long-term memory is the vast library of your life, and sensory memory is the breeze that pushes open the door, then working memory is the small table right at the entrance. Just big enough to lay out what you need right now, no more, no less. Picture this. You walk into a grocery store with a short list in your head. Eggs, milk, bread, maybe bananas if they're ripe. You didn't write it down because it's just a few items. You repeat it once or twice as you walk. You get to the dairy aisle, and suddenly it's gone. What were you here for again? That's working, memory doing its best. Juggling pieces of mental information and sometimes just dropping one. It's your brain's mental scratch pad, a temporary holding space where you manipulate information, not just store it. It's what lets you solve a math problem in your head, follow a conversation, remember the beginning of a sentence while reading the end. Plan your next move in a game of chess. It's the place where thought becomes action. But here's the catch: working memory is limited, painfully so. Most people can hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information at once. Not because they're lazy or forgetful or distracted, just because that's how our brains are wired. Imagine trying to carry a stack of plates through a crowded kitchen. You might make it a few steps, but someone opens a cabinet. A dog walks through, you sneeze, and crash. That's what it's like trying to hold on to too many things in working memory. Scientists often describe working memory as having a central executive, the mental manager that decides what to focus on, what to discard, and what to rehearse. Around that are two main assistants: the phonological loop, which deals with words and sounds like repeating a phone number in your head; the visuospatial sketch pad, which handles images and spatial information, like remembering where you parked your car or picturing a map of your neighborhood. Together, they make up the backstage of your thoughts, everything you're actively thinking about right now. That's working memory. It's your present moment digitized in your brain. But here's where things get personal. Working memory isn't just about logic or calculation. It's also deeply emotional. Stress, anxiety, even lack of sleep can shrink your mental workspace. When your brain is on alert, when it's scanning for threats, real or imagined, it devotes resources to survival, not subtlety. That's why it's so hard to focus when you're overwhelmed. The table is full of emergency signals. There's no room for bananas. On the flip side, calm helps it expand. That's why mindfulness, silence, and sleep boost your clarity. They sweep off the table. They make space. And space is everything, because working memory is how we build new memories. If you can't hold on to a moment long enough to connect it with the rest of your mind, it simply fades. It never even makes it to the hippocampus, let alone long-term storage. That's why attention is the gatekeeper and working memory is the bridge. Now, let's bring this closer to your world. Think about how many times today you used your working memory. That moment you had to hold a reply in your head while someone else was talking. The quick calculation before deciding whether you could afford that extra treat. The directions you glanced at once and followed anyway. You were thinking in motion, and your working memory was spinning all the plates. And then there are the moments you lost track, stood in a room blinking, unsure of why you were there. The thought slipped. The note was erased. That's not failure. That's being human. The truth is, working memory isn't perfect. It was never meant to be. It was meant to be fast, adaptive, like a whiteboard you can scribble on, erase, and rewrite dozens of times a day. But you can strengthen it. Not by cramming more into your head, but by clearing space, breathing slower, practicing focus, giving each thought enough room to breathe. Like tonight, just listening, letting the words arrive, no pressure to remember them all. That in itself is a quiet act of honoring your working memory. So the next time you forget why you opened the fridge, smile a little. Your brain is doing its best managing 100 tasks with a workspace the size of a coffee table, and somehow it works. Working memory isn't glamorous, but it is intimate. It's your now. The flicker between seconds, the pencil line of thought before it's inked, and it's working right now just to bring you this moment. Close your eyes. Let your thoughts go quiet. You've carried enough plates for one day. Hey, still with me? That's nice. Maybe your room is even quieter now. Maybe the night has settled deeper into the walls, and you can hear little things you didn't notice before: the hum of the fridge, the gentle tick of a distant clock, or your own breathing slow and rhythmic, as if your body knows it's time to let go. We're not in a rush. Just you, me, and a gentle idea to float around in short-term memory. Not as dreamy as long-term memory. Not as instant as sensory memory. Short-term memory lives right in the middle. It's the hallway between the doorway and the library. The moment when something steps into your mind and asks, should I stay or should I go? Let's imagine this. Someone tells you their name, maybe at a party. You nod, politely smile, shake hands. Nice to meet you, Jordan, they say. And 2 minutes later, it's gone. You look at them again and panic sets in. What was it? Jason, Jonathan, Jared, nope. Jordan. but it slipped away. That right there is short-term memory doing its thing, or rather not doing it for quite long enough. Short-term memory is like a small tray your brain holds out to catch whatever is happening right now. Not for hours, not for days, just for a few brief seconds to minutes, like catching raindrops on your hand before they fall through your fingers. It holds a limited amount of information, usually around 5 to 9 items, and only for 15 to 30 seconds. If you don't rehearse it, repeat it in your head, attach it to something meaningful, it vanishes. Not because you're careless, just because your brain needs the space. You see, your mind is constantly choosing what to hold on to. Short-term memory is a mental waiting room. Words, sights, numbers, ideas, they come in, sit down. And if they're lucky, they get called into long-term storage. If not, they get up and walk away, never to return. But this system, even though it's short-lived, is powerful. It's what lets you follow directions. Or dial a phone number someone just told you. Or remember the second half of a sentence while you're still processing the first. Without short-term memory, conversations would be chaos. You'd be constantly lost in the middle of sentences, unable to hold on to what just happened. It's not just about remembering, it's about understanding things as they unfold. And here's something sweet. Your brain doesn't just store words or digits in this short space, it stores them in patterns, chunks, groups. That's why you remember a phone number better as 555, 2134 rather than 5, 5, 5, 2, 1, 3, 4. This chunking helps you stretch those precious few seconds a little further. But there's more. Short-term memory is sensitive. It can be interrupted easily. Have you ever walked into a room certain you needed something, then forgot what it was? That's not just absent-mindedness. That's your short-term memory being overwritten by a new thought or simply slipping through because the moment passed. A sneeze, a notification, a noise, that's all it takes, like ripples disturbing a quiet pond. Now let's bring it closer to your real life. Think of your day just today. How many moments relied on short-term memory? When you checked the clock, remembered it was almost time for lunch. When someone said, "Let me give you the address," and you repeated it silently to yourself while typing it into Maps. When you read a sentence and remembered the beginning just long enough to make sense of the end. Your brain was juggling information, constantly catching, holding, releasing. And sometimes it dropped a few things. That's okay. Short-term memory doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough to help you navigate this noisy, beautiful, ever-changing world. And more often than not, it is. So how can we help it? Not by forcing it, but by easing the noise. By slowing down. By repeating gently. By reducing distractions. When you give your short-term memory a little space to breathe, it rewards you with clarity. Not always, but more often than you'd expect. And sometimes even when it forgets, there's a quiet wisdom in that too. Maybe you don't need to remember every name, every number, every detail. Maybe some things are meant to drift. Maybe what matters finds its way into the next drawer, into working memory, into long-term storage, into the place where it can truly stay. Tonight, your short-term memory might be holding this story for a few minutes, or just long enough to feel something, a sense of calm, of curiosity, of comfort. That's enough. And if it fades, that's okay too. Because in the next part of our journey, we'll open the deeper drawer, the long-term memory, the quiet archive where pieces of your life are stored like old letters in a box. But for now, close your eyes if they aren't already. Let the thoughts come and go. Your mind is still gently catching the raindrops, and that is enough. Welcome back, night traveler. Maybe your eyes are almost closed now, your breath slow, your body starting to surrender to the gentle pull of sleep. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to sit up or take notes or remember every word. Just drift with me, because tonight we're stepping into one of the quietest and most mysterious places inside your mind, a vast, invisible vault where the story of your life is being kept. Long-term memory. If working memory is your brain's notepad and short-term memory is a coffee table for daily thoughts, then long-term memory is the great library. And not just any library. Picture a cathedral of recollection, endless in all directions, with warm candlelight flickering along shelves that stretch beyond sight. This is where your brain keeps what it chooses to remember, not for seconds or minutes, but for years, sometimes forever. And here's the most astonishing part. There's no known upper limit. Your long-term memory doesn't fill up like a hard drive. In fact, scientists believe you could store over a quadrillion bytes of information across a lifetime. That's more than all the books in the Library of Congress. And you're doing it with a 3-pound organ made mostly of water and fat. Pretty wild, right? But let's not get too technical. Let's stay dreamy. Long-term memory begins when something sticks, something passes through. Sensory memory survives the chaos of short-term memory and gets rehearsed, revisited, or emotionally marked. That's the key meaning. Your brain doesn't save everything. It saves what matters, and what matters is often emotional or vivid or something that connects to your sense of self. Now, inside this great archive, memories are stored in 2 major forms, explicit and implicit. Explicit memory, also called declarative memory, is what you can consciously recall. It includes episodic memory, the personal moments, like your 5th birthday, the first time you kissed someone, the sound of your childhood bike tires on the gravel road at sunset. These are your life's episodes. They're rich with details, sensations, and the quiet background music of who you were in that moment. Semantic memory, facts, and knowledge. You know that Paris is the capital of France, that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, that your favorite author wrote 6 novels. These memories don't have emotional edges. They're more like solid stones in the riverbed of your mind, always there, even when the water rushes past. Then there's implicit memory. This is the memory beneath the surface, the stuff you know without even knowing you know it. It includes procedural memory, riding a bicycle, typing without looking, tying your shoes. You don't have to remember how it's in your body, stored in the basal ganglia and cerebellum. These memories are the most resistant to forgetting. Once you've learned them, they stick like glue. Priming and conditioning, subtle traces left by repetition or association. Like feeling anxious when you hear a dentist's drill, even if you don't consciously recall the last time you were in that chair. Or being quicker to recognize a word after reading it earlier in the day. Implicit memory shapes our behavior, our reactions, our preferences, without asking for permission. But let's talk about how these memories are stored. Contrary to popular belief, there's no single memory center in the brain. Long-term memories are distributed, scattered across multiple regions. A single memory may involve sights stored in the visual cortex, sounds in the auditory cortex, emotions in the amygdala, and context in the hippocampus. Think of it like a mosaic, thousands of tiny tiles spread across your brain, coming together to form a full picture only when you recall them. And recall itself, that's a reconstruction. You're not replaying a recording. You're rebuilding a scene from fragments, like pulling threads through a loom. That's why your memories can change over time, not because you're lying, but because the act of remembering rewrites them. The memory gets updated, re-encoded, made slightly more current each time. Now here's something gentle and beautiful. Your autobiographical memory, a blend of episodic and semantic, tells the story of who you are. It holds the quiet map of your life, the summers that felt endless, the losses that reshaped you, the small victories you rarely speak of but still smile about in private. It's not just what you remember, it's how you remember that gives you a sense of self. But long-term memory doesn't just sit quietly, waiting to be summoned. It works behind the scenes, shaping how you see the world. It informs your expectations, your beliefs, your intuition. It nudges your decisions, colors your relationships, helps you predict what might happen next. You are not just made of flesh and bone, you are made of memory. And memory is made of time. Some memories fade, of course. That's natural. The brain prunes unused connections to make room for new growth. This is why repetition and sleep are so powerful. Recalling a memory strengthens it. Sleep helps the brain consolidate it, like pressing a flower between the pages of a book to preserve its shape. Without these processes, even our brightest memories begin to blur. But some memories, well, they stay. Vivid, crisp, haunting, or comforting, carried in your body as much as your mind, A smell, a song, a sudden turn of light, and there it is again, like a visitor from another lifetime. You might wonder, with so many memories stored, how does the brain know which one to call up? That's the quiet genius of retrieval cues. A smell, a word, a face. These act as keys. They don't contain the memory, they simply unlock the door. And sometimes, even when you're not looking for a memory, it finds you anyway. So, as you rest here tonight, maybe some of your own long-term memories are gently stirring. Maybe you're remembering a quiet kitchen, a soft voice, a look across the room. You don't need to chase them. Let them drift. Let them settle. Your long-term memory is still writing itself, even now. This moment, this calm, this soft thread of words winding through your thoughts, it might become a tiny tile in your mental mosaic. Or maybe it'll fade. That's okay too, because memory isn't just about what we keep, it's also about what we let go. Breathe in, let it settle, and tomorrow we'll talk about how your brain decides what to keep and what to forget. But for now, let the library doors close, the candles dim. You've already remembered enough for one night. To encode something is to transform it from experience into meaning. It's how your brain translates what just happened into what I might remember later. Not everything gets this treatment. In fact, most things don't. That's why you don't remember what color the cereal box was this morning or the exact layout of the clouds you saw through the windshield. Encoding is selective, thoughtful, and beautifully human. There are different kinds of encoding, each with its own texture. The first is visual encoding. This is when you take in what you see, shapes, colors, movement. If I show you a photo of your childhood bedroom the way your brain recognizes it, furniture, curtains, posters, that's visual encoding working behind the scenes. It stores the look of a moment, that face in the crowd, the sparkle of sunlight on water, the precise arrangement of books on a shelf you haven't touched in years. Then there's acoustic encoding, the sound of language, the rhythm of someone's voice, that tune you can't get out of your head. Your brain loves patterns, especially in sound. That's why rhymes, songs, and repetition make things easier to remember. It's why advertisers use jingles, why lullabies live in you long after childhood ends. The brain's auditory pathways hum with memory. And then perhaps the most powerful of all semantic encoding. This is meaning-based encoding. When your brain doesn't just take in the sights and sounds of something, but understands it, makes sense of it, connects it to what you already know. This kind of encoding is what turns experience into knowledge and knowledge into wisdom. It's how a simple story becomes unforgettable. It's why metaphors stick like glue, why emotional moments are etched deeper than neutral ones. Now, here's something lovely to know: depth matters. Your brain remembers deeply processed information far better than shallow details. If you simply read a list of words, you'll forget most of them. But if you're asked to use the words in a sentence or connect them to a personal experience, suddenly they stay. The more meaning you attach, the more hooks your brain has to hold on to that memory. Encoding is not just passive recording, it's active construction. The more attention you give, the more pathways your brain weaves. That's why you remember the day your teacher cried, but not the 100 days she simply handed out worksheets. Emotion adds weight. Purpose adds stickiness. Let's go a little deeper still. There are two broad types of processing involved in encoding. Automatic processing happens without effort. You remember what you had for breakfast or where your favorite coffee mug sits, not because you tried to remember, but because it was embedded in the rhythm of your day. Effortful processing, on the other hand, takes intention. Studying for a test, memorizing a phone number, learning a new dance move. You repeat, rehearse, focus, and in doing so, the memory forms more slowly, but more securely. And guess what helps both types of processing? Context. Your brain encodes information better when it's tied to where you are, how you feel, what you're doing. That's why returning to a familiar place can bring back long-forgotten memories. The scent of rain on warm pavement, the feeling of an old song playing in a car you haven't driven in years. These are contextual cues, and your brain uses them like bookmarks. Encoding is also shaped by emotion, sometimes sharply. The amygdala. Your brain's emotional spotlight helps decide what gets burned into memory. It says, hey, this is scary or exciting or overwhelming. Don't forget this one. That's why trauma can lead to vivid, even intrusive memories. And why joy can imprint days in full color. So if you're wondering why certain moments stick and others slip, think about how much meaning, emotion, and attention was present in that moment. Think about whether your brain whispered, this matters, or simply shrugged. Now let's slow it down. Bring it back to now. Right here, as you're listening to these words, your brain is encoding. Maybe not the entire script, but perhaps the softness of the voice, a particular phrase that made you smile, the weightlessness of being cared for in the dark. These impressions aren't being carved into stone, they're being drawn in sand. But if you revisit them, they might stay. And sometimes even a feeling is enough. Your brain may not remember what was said tomorrow, but it may remember how it felt warm, gentle, safe. That too is a kind of memory, the kind that lives not in facts, but in tone, in rhythm, in the spaces between words. So what can you do to encode better? Slow down, pay attention, add meaning, tell yourself stories, connect new things to old ones, use your senses, sleep well, repeat gently. Learn with kindness. Emotion is a highlighter, use it with care, and most of all, be present, because the brain only encodes now. The rest is imagination or memory. But the moment you're in, that's the doorway. So, as we wrap this part of our journey, take a quiet breath. You've just watched your mind transform invisible sound into structure, awareness into connection. You've watched it encode, and it's still working even as you close your eyes. We'll talk soon about what happens next, what emotion does to memory, and how some moments get branded into your heart like stars in the night sky. But for now, rest. You've taken in enough meaning for one evening. There are memories that don't need to be summoned. They rise on their own, quietly, suddenly, when a familiar song plays, when the air smells like wood smoke, or when someone's expression reminds you of someone you once knew. And when they return, they don't just bring back images. They bring back feeling. Your heart rate shifts. Your breath changes. A warmth or an ache surfaces. That's what happens when emotion doesn't just accompany memory, it becomes its core. When an experience touches your emotions, your brain doesn't record it like just any other moment. It stamps it, seals it, stores it differently. Emotion makes memory vivid, not necessarily clearer or louder, but deeper, like ink that sinks into the fibers of the page rather than simply sitting on the surface. Deep in your brain, the amygdala plays a starring role in this process. It's your emotional alarm system constantly scanning for anything that might be important, good or bad. When something moves you, joy, fear, sadness, surprise, the amygdala sends a signal to the hippocampus, the memory organizer. Save this. This matters. That's why emotionally charged events are remembered more easily and more intensely. You might forget what you ate for lunch 3 days ago, but you can remember down to the light in the room the moment someone broke your heart, or the exact sound of your best friend laughing during a late-night conversation, or the smell in the air the day you got life-changing news. Emotion shapes memory in ways both beautiful and at times difficult. There's a name for the most emotionally vivid memories, flashbulb memories. These are the moments that feel almost photographed in time. You remember where you were, what you were doing, the expressions on people's faces, even the color of the sky. These aren't just mental notes, they're living snapshots, often tied to moments of shock, celebration, loss, or joy. But emotion doesn't always serve memory gently. Chronic stress, especially long-term anxiety or trauma, can disrupt memory formation. When your brain is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, the amygdala goes into overdrive and the hippocampus struggles to keep up. It's like trying to organize a library during an earthquake. That's why people who experience trauma may have fragmented or blurred memories or moments that never seem to fade, no matter how much time passes. On the other hand, positive emotions, curiosity, gratitude, wonder, love, can help strengthen memory. A teacher who makes you laugh while explaining a tough concept helps the material stick. A moment filled with awe or connection becomes not just memorable, but nourishing. Joy can leave as permanent a trace as sorrow, but it whispers instead of shouts. Emotion also doesn't just influence what we remember, it affects how we remember it. Two people can live through the same event and recall it completely differently because each person's emotional lens colors the experience. One may remember warmth, the other tension. One recalls connection, the other distance. The brain is not a camera, it's a storyteller, and the emotion is the filter through which the story is told. In learning and education, this truth is gold. When something is emotionally meaningful, your brain wants to keep it. That's why storytelling works better than memorizing lists. Why a powerful teacher or a passionate voice can make knowledge stick. Emotion acts as an anchor. Without it, facts drift away. But emotion can also distort. The mood you're in while remembering something affects what you recall and how you feel about it. This is called mood-congruent memory. When you're sad, you're more likely to remember sad things. When you're happy, you recall the good. The memory hasn't changed, but the lighting on the scene has. It's as if the projector in your mind adds a tint to the film based on your current emotional weather. It's one of the reasons our memories feel so unreliable at times. We second-guess them. Did it really happen that way? And often it did, but how we remember it depends on how we feel now. That's not a flaw. That's just memory being deeply human. Still, that doesn't mean we're helpless. Understanding the emotional side of memory can help us treat ourselves more gently. Forgive the gaps. Appreciate the vivid parts. Accept that remembering is not about precision, it's about meaning. So if there's a memory inside you that refuses to fade, it's because it once mattered. And maybe still does. It carved its place not through logic, but through feeling. And if there's something you wish you could forget, know that your brain was simply trying to protect you. It doesn't store pain to punish you. It does it to prepare you, to teach you, to help you survive. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how memory becomes stronger through something quiet and patient repetition, a gentle rhythm that turns fragile moments into lasting knowledge. But for now, let your thoughts soften. Let the emotion in your mind, whatever it is, settle like dust in moonlight. The memories that need to stay already know how to hold on. Your brain doesn't remember everything it sees. It remembers what it sees again, and again, and again, quietly, gently, not with loud fanfare or sudden lightning bolts of insight, but with rhythm, soft, steady rhythm, like waves lapping against the same piece of shore, slowly shaping it into something lasting. Repetition is not about brute force. It's about persistence, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that knows memory is not made in a single moment, but in patterns that echo across time. When something is repeated, whether it's a word, an image, an action, it begins to carve a groove in the mind, a faint imprint at first. But with each revisit, the path becomes clearer, stronger, more automatic. Neurons that fire together begin to wire together. This is one of the brain's core principles. Hebbian learning the idea that repeated activation of a neural pathway strengthens that connection, making future recall easier and faster. Think of a trail through a forest. The first time you walk it, it's hard. Branches scratch. The path is uncertain, but the more often you take it, the more defined it becomes. Eventually, you walk it without thinking. That's repetition. That's memory becoming reflex. Repetition isn't just mechanical, it's biological. Each time you review information, revisit a thought practice, a skill, your brain reactivates the associated networks. This keeps them alive. It's like watering a plant. Without water, the roots dry up. Without review, the memory fades. But not all repetition is created equal. Passive repetition, like reading the same line over and over without thinking, doesn't do much. It's like staring at a painting while your mind is elsewhere. But active repetition, recalling, testing, using the information transforms it. That's called retrieval practice, and it's one of the most effective ways to make a memory stick. Imagine reading a fact, then looking away and asking yourself, what was that again? That moment of mental effort, that stretch, is what strengthens the memory. It's not about rereading, it's about reaching. There's also spaced repetition, a method that involves reviewing material over increasing intervals of time. Instead of cramming everything at once, you revisit the information after a few hours, then a day, then 3 days, then a week. Each time the memory gets reactivated just before it fades, reinforcing the neural connection like retying a knot before it loosens. It's the opposite of cramming. Cramming works temporarily. It loads short-term memory, but rarely makes it to long-term storage. It's like scribbling something in the sand just before the tide comes in. Spaced repetition, on the other hand, is like carving into stone, slow, but meant to last. Repetition is also how skills are formed. When you practice an instrument, a sport, a language, it's repetition that builds fluency. At first, everything feels clunky. You overthink, you hesitate. But with time, the motions become automatic. That's procedural memory being trained through repetition over and over until the conscious effort melts away. And yet repetition isn't only about knowledge or skill. It can also bring comfort, the same bedtime story, the same prayer, the same walk at the same hour each evening. These rituals don't just reinforce memory, they reinforce meaning. Repetition becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes memory. Memory becomes identity. But repetition can also work against us. If we repeat certain thoughts, especially negative ones, they too form strong pathways. Worry, rumination, harsh self-talk. The brain, being neutral, doesn't judge what you repeat. It simply strengthens whatever gets revisited. That's why mindful repetition matters. What you rehearse, you reinforce. What you repeat, you remember not just as information, but as belief. So if you want to remember something, truly remember it. Don't just read it, use it, speak it, write it, connect it, return to it gently, not frantically. Let it grow like a vine, not crash like a wave. And also, know this: forgetting is part of the process. Every act of remembering includes a bit of loss. A few details drop away, a few pieces rearrange, but with enough repetition, the core holds. Even now your brain is doing it, repeating tiny patterns, sound to meaning, meaning to feeling, strengthening a memory you may not even realize is forming. Maybe not of every word, but of the tone, the calm, the rhythm. That rhythm is how you learned your first words, how you learned to tie your shoes, how you remember the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in years, and it's how your brain will carry parts of tonight with you into tomorrow. In our next chapter, we'll explore something beautiful: how sleep helps secure these memories. How the mind works while the body rests quietly, stitching repetition into permanence. But for now, you've repeated enough. Rest. Let the grooves settle. You've already begun to remember. While you sleep, your body may rest, but your brain gets to work. Quietly, tirelessly, patiently. In the deep stillness of night, long after the world has gone quiet and the thoughts have slowed to a whisper, your brain begins sorting through the day's experiences, deciding what to keep, what to let go, and what to gently weave into the long thread of your life's memory. This process is called memory consolidation, and sleep is where it happens best. Throughout the day, you collect moments, tiny fragments of information, emotions, sensations, ideas. They arrive in pieces scattered across the landscape of your brain. At first, many of them are fragile, floating in short-term memory or held in working memory just long enough to finish a task. But it's only during sleep that these pieces begin to settle, to take root, to transform into long-term memory. Sleep is not just a pause, it's a rehearsal space, a restoration chamber, a quiet workshop where your brain replays and reorganizes, transferring memories from temporary holding to deeper, more permanent neural structures. Different stages of sleep play different roles. During slow-wave sleep, deep non-REM sleep, Your brain reactivates patterns of neural activity associated with experiences you had during the day. It's like watching a movie of your own memories in low resolution again and again. This repeated replay helps strengthen the neural connections involved reinforcing what you've learned. It's here that declarative memories, facts, words, concepts get the most attention. Then comes REM sleep, the phase where your eyes flicker beneath closed lids and dreams swirl through your mind like abstract poetry. This is when emotional and procedural memories are processed, things like skills, habits, and the emotional meaning of events. The brain uses this time not just to store, but to integrate, to link old knowledge with new experiences, to connect the logical with the emotional. What you dream may be nonsense on the surface, but underneath your brain is doing sophisticated work, sorting, categorizing, strengthening, editing. That's why a good night's sleep after learning something new is so powerful. It's not a break, it's a continuation of learning just behind the curtain. Sleep is the backstage crew making sure the show runs smoothly the next day. But even more beautiful than the biology is the gentleness of it all. Your brain does not demand that you be awake to learn. It doesn't insist that you try harder, focus, more stay alert. In sleep, it asks nothing of you. It simply does the work quietly, faithfully, night after night. There's also a delicate relationship between dreams and memory. Though we don't fully understand why we dream, there's evidence that dreams help blend the emotional with the factual, turning memories into narratives shaping how we later feel about what we experienced. A bad day may become less sharp after dreaming. A complex idea may seem clearer. A feeling left unresolved may feel lighter by morning. Sleep doesn't just strengthen memories, it transforms them. And when sleep is disrupted, memory suffers. Sleep deprivation reduces the hippocampus's ability to encode new memories. It's like trying to write in a book with pages missing. You may go through the motions, read, listen, repeat, but without sleep, the impressions don't hold. That's why students who pull all-nighters often forget what they studied. Why memories from sleepless periods, new parenthood, intense stress, long travel, often feel foggy and disjointed. It's also why rest is essential after emotional events. Your brain needs time to metabolize what happened, to give the memory a place, to file it not just in storage, but within your emotional understanding. And here's something gentle to hold on to. Even short moments of rest can help. A brief nap, a quiet afternoon pause. These aren't laziness, they're part of memory's rhythm. They give the brain a chance to breathe, to stitch things together in peace. So if you ever feel like your thoughts are scattered, if learning something new feels overwhelming, if you can't quite hold on to what matters, sometimes the answer isn't more effort. Sometimes the answer is sleep. In those dark hours while you drift, your mind is organizing your days into meaning. It's replaying voices, rehearsing ideas, wrapping emotions in soft tissue, and tucking them into place. And maybe when you wake, you won't remember the dream, but something in you will feel different, more whole, more ready. In our next chapter, we'll explore how attention shapes memory, how simply choosing to focus can determine what the brain decides to keep and what it quietly lets fall away. But for now, your brain knows what to do. Let it work in the background. Let the curtain fall. You've already done your part. Sleep will take it from here. Every moment of your life, information floods your senses. Light, color, movement, sound, scent, emotion, all arriving at once. Your brain can't possibly hold on to it all, so it does something elegant, something powerful. It shines a spotlight. That spotlight is called attention, and where it lands determines what becomes a memory and what dissolves into nothing. Attention is the gatekeeper of memory. Without it, experience doesn't even get through the front door. The brain may see, something may hear it, but if attention isn't engaged, there is no encoding, no storage, no recall. It's as if the moment never happened at all. You've felt this before. The way you can read a whole page and realize you weren't paying attention to any of it. The way someone's voice can drift into the background when your thoughts are elsewhere. or how you can miss the sound of your own name in a crowd unless you're tuned in. Attention is selective, not just passively noticing, but actively choosing what matters. Neurologically, attention functions like a filter. It prioritizes, it amplifies, it reduces background noise so that the brain can focus its energy and resources. That's crucial because attention isn't unlimited. It has a narrow bandwidth. Your brain can only spotlight a few things at once. Everything else dims. But attention isn't just about sharpness. It's about meaning. The brain is drawn to what feels important emotionally, socially, biologically. That's why we notice sudden movements, loud noises, or a baby's cry. That's why we're more likely to remember moments that surprise or move us. Attention locks in when something breaks the pattern. There are two main types of attention. Bottom-up attention is automatic. It reacts to the environment. A flash of light, a crash, a voice calling your name. These things grab attention without your permission. Top-down attention is controlled. It's the deliberate focus you bring when you choose to listen, to read, to learn. It's slower but more precise, more powerful. And here's where memory comes in. Only what gets attention gets encoded. The spotlight must land before the camera clicks. When you're deeply engaged, listening closely, watching intently, fully absorbed, the brain is more likely to file the moment into long-term memory. When your mind is divided, distracted, or indifferent, the memory may never form. This is why multitasking is memory's enemy. When your attention is split, so is your memory. You may feel productive, but your brain is just toggling rapidly between tasks, never giving full energy to any one thing. It's like trying to catch butterflies with two nets in opposite directions. You miss more than you keep. On the other hand, focused attention is a memory enhancer. It's what makes meditation, reading, storytelling, and one-on-one conversation so effective at creating lasting impressions. These activities narrow the spotlight, steady the beam, let the details soak in. Even mind-wandering can serve memory if it's intentional. When the brain drifts around a single idea, emotion, or memory, it often uncovers associations, patterns, insights. It's not the absence of attention, it's attention turned inward. Daydreaming done gently is a kind of cognitive rehearsal. It lets the brain play with memory, re-encode it, reshape it. But here's a softer truth. Attention is tied to presence. When you're fully present, the moment becomes vivid. When you're not, it slips past. This is why some memories feel so sharp, not because they were big events, but because you were there for them. Fully, openly, the taste of a mango on a hot afternoon, the curve of someone's smile across a table, the quiet of a bookstore you walked into just to escape the rain. Attention made them real, and memory kept them. In learning, attention is foundational. If a teacher can capture it, if a moment can hold it, the brain listens. Repetition may reinforce memory, but attention is the first act of love. It's the yes before the commitment. And attention can be trained. Like a muscle, it grows stronger with care. Meditation, single tasking, deep listening, silent reflection. These are small acts that widen the beam, that teach the mind to stay. So the next time you want to remember something, a person's name, a meaningful detail, a moment you don't want to lose, give it your full attention. Not for long, just long enough to say, "This matters." I'm here for it. Your brain is listening. And that spotlight, when aimed with care, becomes the first stroke in a painting that lasts. In our next chapter, we'll explore the delightful world of mnemonics, how your brain uses tricks, patterns, and little stories to hold on to even the trickiest pieces of information. But for now, let your attention soften. Let it drift. You've held the light long enough for tonight. Memory loves meaning. But sometimes, it also loves a good trick, a shortcut, a quirky rhyme, a strange little story that makes no sense unless you're inside the joke. That's where mnemonics come in, a kind of memory magic, not because it's mysterious, but because it works so beautifully well. Mnemonics are tools your brain uses to encode, store, and recall information more easily. They're not about memorizing harder, they're about memorizing smarter. They take something difficult, dry, or disconnected, and turn it into something sticky, colorful, and alive. At their core, mnemonics work because they tap into association, the brain's favorite language. You remember best when something new connects to something familiar. A mental hook, a visual anchor, a strange little image. The brain holds onto weirdness. It forgets blandness. Let's start with a classic, acronyms. Think of HOMES to remember the Great Lakes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. One simple word holds 5 pieces of information. Or Roy G. Biv for the colors of the rainbow. These tricks work because they reduce complexity into something recognizable, pronounceable, and easy to rehearse. Then there's rhyming and rhythm mnemonics wrapped in music. 30 days hath September, or I before E except after C. The brain is a pattern-finding machine. Rhymes create internal music. They give memory a beat. That's why jingles are so hard to forget, and why poems last longer than prose. Another powerful technique, the method of Loki, also known as the memory palace. It's as old as ancient Greece. Here's how it works. You imagine a familiar place, a house, a walk, a street, and mentally place the things you want to remember along that path. A tiger in the bathtub, a calendar on the couch, a grocery list hidden in the kitchen sink. The weirder, the better. Then, when you need to recall the items, you walk through that space in your mind. The brain recalls location instinctively. By linking the unfamiliar to the spatially familiar, you make memory easier to access. Mnemonics also play with visual encoding. Our brains are deeply visual. A boring number like 701325 can be impossible to recall, but turn it into a shape, a story, or an image. Suddenly it becomes something your brain wants to keep. That's why memory champions can recall hundreds of digits. They don't store numbers. They store images and links. Chunking is another trick. Instead of remembering 10 separate items, you group them into 3 meaningful chunks. Phone numbers do this by default. So do credit cards. So does language. When we say once upon a time, we don't think of 4 separate words. We recall a phrase, a single chunk. But here's the most important part. Mnemonics are personal. What works for one brain might not work for another. A joke, an image, a strange connection, it only needs to make sense to you. That's why student-made mnemonics are so powerful. They're crafted in the language of your own associations. The mind doesn't care if the trick is silly. It cares if it sticks. Mnemonics also work best when they're emotional, visual, and absurd. The brain remembers what stands out. A dancing elephant. Yes, a dull list. No. That's not immaturity, it's neuroscience. And they're not just for kids. Professionals use mnemonics constantly. Musicians, doctors, pilots, even actors memorizing long scripts rely on rhythm structure and association. Mnemonics are tools of efficiency, not shortcuts of laziness. They also play a quiet psychological role, confidence. When you know you have a reliable hook to hang your memory on, your mind relaxes. You trust yourself more. Anxiety goes down, recall improves, and suddenly memory becomes less of a burden and more of a game. Of course, mnemonics aren't magic wands. They help you access memory, but they don't replace understanding. The trick should lead you back to something meaningful. Otherwise, it's just noise. That's why the best mnemonics are bridges, not destinations. They help you reach what matters. So if you ever feel like your memory is failing you, try adding a little color, a little rhythm, a little nonsense. Turn your list into a parade. Turn your facts into a riddle. Turn your to-do items into a treasure hunt through your kitchen. Your brain might surprise you. And remember, the sillier it feels, the more likely it is to last. In the next chapter, we'll take this even further into the world of sensation and explore how the 5 senses embed memory in ways we don't always notice, until a smell or a song brings everything rushing back. But for now, let your mind play with images, patterns, and rhythm. You're allowed to make memory fun, and sometimes, the stranger it is, the more unforgettable it becomes. Not all memories begin in the mind. Many begin on the skin, in the eyes, in the nose. Before thought, before language, before even awareness, your senses are already recording. The five senses sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste aren't just how you experience the world, they're how your memories enter it. Each sense acts like a key, unlocking a different kind of doorway into the past. And sometimes that doorway swings open without warning. A song plays, a familiar perfume passes by, a certain texture brushes against your fingertips, and suddenly you're there again. Not in imagination, not in recollection, but in something that feels closer to reliving. That's the power of sensory memory. It embeds deeper than logic, more direct than words, more ancient than reason. Let's start with smell. Of all the senses, smell is the most closely tied to emotion and memory. That's because scent signals travel directly to the olfactory bulb, which connects to the amygdala and hippocampus, your emotional and memory centers. No detours, no filters. That's why a whiff of cinnamon can bring back an entire kitchen from your childhood, or why the smell of sunscreen can feel like summer. These memories aren't just visual, they carry warmth, tone, atmosphere. Smell is memory's quiet trigger. It doesn't need permission to bring the past back. It just arrives. Then there's sound. Music in particular is woven tightly into the brain's emotional architecture. A certain melody can evoke tears, laughter, longing. Not because the song itself is sad or happy, but because your brain has stitched it to a moment. A dance, a drive down a sunlit road, a quiet night when you were waiting for someone who never showed. Sound embeds rhythm and sequence into memory, especially when combined with movement or repetition. That's why we remember lyrics better than prose, why we hum before we think. Even voices tone. Cadence laughter can become memory anchors. Long after faces fade, we sometimes still remember the way someone said our name. Sight, of course, is memory's most obvious ally. We are deeply visual creatures. The shape of a building, the light at a certain hour, the layout of a street you haven't walked in 10 years. These images live in the visual cortex and often linger in high resolution. But visual memory is not just about seeing, it's about framing. Your brain selects what to focus on. The color of her dress, the way the trees bent in the wind, the light behind someone's eyes. Your memories don't record everything, they take snapshots. And the emotional charge behind the moment decides what gets saved. Then comes touch, textures, temperatures, the way something felt beneath your fingers, the silk of a blanket from childhood, the sandpaper edge of a broken branch, the soft resistance of another person's hand in yours. These sensations don't just mark memory, they embody it. Touch memory is deeply physical, sometimes stored in places even your conscious mind can't access. It's why we flinch before we remember why we crave a certain softness when we're grieving, and finally taste. Less talked about, but just as potent. A single bite can carry decades, a certain spice, a certain sweetness. These are memories you hold with your tongue. Taste is especially powerful when tied to family culture and ritual. Holiday dishes, birthday cakes, street food from your travels. Your brain remembers flavor through association, layering it with stories, settings, and the people who were there. But here's the most beautiful part. Sensory memories are layered. They rarely appear alone. The smell of rain comes with the gray of the sky, the sound of footsteps with the flicker of hallway light, the taste of strawberries with the scratch of summer grass beneath your legs. Your brain weaves these sensations into a multi-sensory memory web, a network so intricate that any one thread, when touched, vibrates through the rest. This is why memory is often experienced as a sudden flood, not a trickle. One scent, one sound, one flash of color, and a cascade begins. You don't just remember, you feel. You return. And sometimes, just for a moment, you become the version of yourself that lived that memory the first time. In storytelling and learning and healing, this matters. The more senses you engage, the stronger the memory. That's why hands-on experience, vivid imagery, and emotional tone make teaching more effective. That's why rituals and ceremonies stick. They don't just use words, they immerse. And when we lose a sense sight, with age, smell, with illness, our memories shift. Not disappear, but reorient. The brain adjusts the way it recalls, like leaning more on one foot when the other grows tired. So, what can you do with this knowledge? Notice. Pay attention to the sensory details in your life, what the light feels like on your skin, what your tea smells like, the texture of your handwriting. These small things are not trivial. They're the building blocks of the memory you're forming right now. And when you want to anchor a moment, really keep it use your senses. Pause to feel the moment in all directions. The more threads you lay down, the easier it will be to find your way back. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore something a little strange and often misunderstood false memories, how sometimes our brain remembers things that never happened, and why it does so with such confidence. But for now, let your senses rest. Let your skin, your ears, your breath soften. You've already taken in more than you know. Memory feels like truth, a mental recording, a rewindable video of what happened, how it happened, who was there. But memory is not a camera. It's not even a notebook. It's a story, a reconstruction. And sometimes that story includes missing pages, added lines, or whole scenes that were never actually there. These are memory gaps and sometimes false memories. They aren't failures of the brain. They're features designed to help you make sense of experience, not to perfectly archive it. Let's start with the gaps. Your brain doesn't remember every detail. That would be overwhelming. Instead, it captures fragments, snapshots, sounds, impressions, and then later it fills in the blanks. It smooths over rough edges. It adds a bit of background. It guesses. Think of it like reconstructing a jigsaw puzzle, but not all the pieces are real. Some are borrowed from other puzzles. Some are pure invention. But the final image feels complete because that's the brain's job to build meaning, not just store facts. Most of the time, this system works beautifully. But sometimes it leads to false memories, recollections of things that didn't happen or didn't happen the way you remember. And here's the startling truth. False memories can feel just as real as true ones. You may see it in your mind, feel it in your body, recall it with total confidence. But that doesn't guarantee accuracy. Memory is not about precision, it's about coherence. Your brain wants the story to make sense, even if it means editing the facts. Psychologists have studied this for decades. In classic experiments, people were shown lists of related words like bed, dream, tired, snore, nap. Later, they confidently remembered seeing the word sleep, even though it wasn't there. The mind created a false memory because the word fit the theme. The story. False memories often emerge when the original memory was vague or emotionally intense. You've retold or reheard the memory many times. Someone else suggested a detail that your brain absorbed as truth. Time has softened the edges and your mind filled them in. Repetition is a key player. Every time you remember something, you're not just playing it back, you're rewriting it. You may add something new, remove a piece, blend it with another memory. Over time, the story changes and you believe it more, not less. Social reinforcement makes it even stronger. When someone agrees with your version of a story, your brain doubles down. Yes, that's how it happened. Shared memories become collective myths. Families, friend groups, entire cultures build identities on stories that may be partially or entirely false. But false memories aren't always harmless. In courtrooms, in therapy rooms, in personal relationships, they can carry heavy weight. Eyewitness testimony, for instance, is famously unreliable despite how certain witnesses feel. Confidence does not equal accuracy. That's why understanding the fluid nature of memory is essential not just scientifically, but ethically. And yet false memories are not always negative. Sometimes they help us heal. You may remember a childhood event as warmer than it really was, or believe someone comforted you in a moment when in fact they didn't. The brain is not lying, it's protecting. Sometimes kindness requires a little fiction. Memory is not a recording, it's a retelling, a personal mythology. It bends to emotion, to repetition, to suggestion. But that doesn't make it useless, it makes it human. The point of memory is not perfect recall, it's identity learning connection. And sometimes revision is part of survival. So, what can you do? First, be gentle with your memory. Understand that it shifts. Be skeptical of extreme certainty. When someone says, I know exactly what happened, remember that they might, but also they might not. Be open to dialogue. Shared stories are stronger when told together. And when you're unsure, don't panic. The feeling of knowing doesn't always match the reality of what was. That doesn't make you broken, it makes you beautifully complex. False memories remind us that memory is not a mirror, it's a canvas. Painted, repainted, smudged, and layered over time. In our next chapter, we'll shift to something more grounded, how memory changes with age, why some things fade and others grow sharper with time. But for now, if you've forgotten a few things or remembered something differently, that's okay. The story was never about getting everything right. It was always about making it yours. There's something quietly poetic about how memory changes with age. As time stretches, the way we store access and hold on to memories shifts, not just in quantity, but in quality. The present becomes a little more slippery, while the past oddly grows sharper. You've probably seen it in someone you love, maybe in yourself. A grandmother forgets what day it is, but vividly recalls her wedding in detail. A grandfather can't quite remember where he put his keys, but lights up when talking about his childhood dog. It feels backward. How could the older memories stay when the newer ones disappear so easily? The answer lies in how memory is layered and how age slowly rearranges the shelves. To understand why this happens, we have to revisit the roles of two major brain regions, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. The hippocampus, as you've learned, helps encode new memories, especially recent events. The prefrontal cortex, meanwhile, helps with working memory attention and decision-making. As we age, both of these regions show natural wear. Not damage necessarily, just a gentle slowing. Think of it like an old library whose filing system has grown more delicate over time. The books are still there, but it takes a little longer to find the right one. And sometimes, the librarian misplaces the card. This is why short-term and working memory often suffer first. Names, dates, recent conversations, they slip more easily. The brain is still encoding, but not as efficiently. Attention drifts more. Distractions intrude more easily. And the consolidation of new memories, especially without enough sleep or focus, becomes inconsistent. But long-term memory, especially autobiographical memory from youth and early adulthood, that tends to hold on. In fact, it may even grow more accessible. This phenomenon is known as the reminiscence bump, a period from roughly ages 10 to 30 that people remember most clearly throughout life. Why? Because this stretch is filled with firsts. First love, first job, first heartbreak, first steps into independence, emotion, novelty, change. These are memory's favorite things, and early life is full of them. As we age, we may not be able to recall what we had for lunch, but we can often describe a conversation from 50 years ago where we were sitting, what was said, how it felt. That's not regression. It's the brain returning to its strongest imprints. And while aging can come with forgetfulness, it's not all decline. Some aspects of memory improve. Older adults often show stronger semantic memory, the memory of facts, vocabulary, and general knowledge. They tend to be better at seeing big-picture connections, pattern recognition, and emotional regulation. Wisdom, after all, is just memory applied with grace. The brain compensates. It recruits other regions to support memory tasks. It finds workarounds. It adapts. And even as certain memories fade, the emotional essence often remains. An elderly person may forget the details of a story, but still remember how it made them feel. That emotional trace lingers long after the facts are gone. The music stays even when the lyrics disappear. Of course, memory challenges with age vary widely. There's the gentle forgetfulness of normal aging. And then there are more serious changes, like mild cognitive impairment, MCI, or Alzheimer's disease. These affect not just memory, but identity, routine relationships. It's one thing to forget your grocery list. It's another to forget your daughter's name. That's why it's important to approach memory loss in aging with both compassion and clarity. Forgetfulness doesn't always signal disease. It often signals a slowing process, not a broken one. There are ways to support memory in aging gently and effectively. Staying mentally active, reading puzzles, storytelling. Maintaining social connections, getting adequate sleep and exercise, reducing stress and multitasking, creating routines and using reminders, eating a balanced brain-friendly diet. But perhaps the most powerful tool is patience from others and from oneself. We live in a culture obsessed with youth and speed, but real memory, often needs slowness. It asks for space. It deepens with reflection. And in aging, memory becomes less about what you can recall instantly and more about what you can share meaningfully. The old stories matter, the ones that get told and retold, the ones that gather warmth like well-used blankets. Sometimes that's how memory lives on, not in precision, but in presence. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how memory is shaped not just by individuals, but by culture, how the way we remember is influenced by the world we grow up in. But for now, if you've forgotten a few things lately, it's okay. You're human, you're aging, and your oldest memories, the ones that still shine, they stayed for a reason. Memory isn't just personal, it's cultural. The way we remember, what we choose to hold on to, how we tell our stories, what we consider important, depends not only on the architecture of our brain, but on the shape of the world around us. Family, language, traditions, beliefs, these form the quiet scaffolding beneath every memory we carry. You're not born remembering like a Western philosopher or an Eastern poet. You learn how to remember by watching those around you, the stories they repeat, the silences they keep, the kinds of questions they ask. In some cultures, memory is linear, a timeline, past, present, future lined up like train cars. In others, memory is circular events, repeat themes, return. The past is always near. In some places, individual memory is valued, what you did, how you felt, what you learned. In others, memory is collective, what we endured, how our family lived, what our people remember. And these differences run deep. For example, research shows that people raised in Western cultures tend to have earlier first memories, often centered around themselves, birthdays, solo achievements, moments of pride or surprise. In contrast, those raised in East Asian cultures often recall memories that are more social, more relational, helping family sharing meals, participating in group rituals. It's not that one brain remembers better, it's that memory is trained to spotlight what the culture values. Language also plays a role. Some languages encode time differently. Future events might be spoken about more abstractly or more urgently. Some use more vivid metaphors. Others describe the world through spatial relationships. The cup is to the east of the bowl, rather than egocentric ones, the cup is to my left. These subtle shifts influence how memories are stored and retrieved. The words we use shape the memories we keep. Even storytelling itself is shaped by culture. In some traditions, stories are chronological: event A led to B, which led to C. In others, they're associative, woven through metaphor, image, or recurring themes. In one culture, silence might be a pause. In another, a conclusion. How you structure a story affects how you remember it. What you repeat, you reinforce. And collective memory, what a community chooses to remember or forget, is a powerful force. Entire nations are built on shared memories, revolutions, tragedies, victories, losses. These are passed down through monuments, holidays, textbooks, music, and sometimes through silence. The stories not told can shape us just as much as the ones that are. Family plays a crucial role too. Your parents, grandparents, even the emotional tone of the dinner table, all of it teaches you what kinds of memory matter. Some families emphasize resilience, others nostalgia. Some pass down recipes, others warnings. Some memories are lovingly preserved, others are reshaped or quietly buried. And this means that memory can be a bridge or a barrier. A story that feels sacred to one person might seem forgettable to another. A name, a song, a place steeped in meaning for one culture, invisible in another. This is why cross-cultural memory can be both illuminating and humbling. It reminds us that our way of remembering is not universal, it's inherited. But here's the quiet beauty: memory is not fixed, it's flexible. And culture is not a cage, it's a container. You can learn new ways to remember. You can adopt other traditions. You can carry your own stories while honoring the stories of others. This matters deeply in an interconnected world. When we hear stories from cultures not our own, we're not just learning history, we're expanding memory itself. We're stretching the brain's idea of what counts as meaningful. That's why memoirs, folktales, films, and oral histories are not just entertainment, they're invitations to remember differently. And the more we understand how culture shapes memory, the more we can listen with empathy. Not everyone recalls the same event the same way, and that's not about accuracy, it's about perspective. So the next time someone tells you a story you can't quite relate to, pause. Listen, consider the culture beneath their memory. What matters to them may reveal what you've never been taught to see. In our next chapter, we'll explore something beautiful and strange: collective memory. Not just shaped by culture, but by community, how we remember together, build shared identity, and pass memory from one generation to the next. But for now, feel the quiet thread of memory that connects you to your family, your land, your language. It has shaped far more than you know. Some memories don't belong to individuals. They belong to us, to families, nations, cultures, generations. They are the stories we tell together, the events we carry in common, the shadows and light passed down not just through blood, but through belief. This is collective memory. And though it lives in many minds, it often feels like it has a single heart. Unlike personal memory, which is shaped by lived experience, collective memory is shaped by shared narrative. It's history made human. It's the past told, retold, and remembered so that a community can say, "This is who we are." We see it in the rituals that span continents. The silence held on certain days, the candles lit, the flags lowered, the music played once a year, always the same way. These aren't just commemorations, they are acts of maintenance. They keep memory alive, not through storage, but through repetition, through presence. Collective memory forms around moments of significance, joyous or traumatic. Wars, revolutions, natural disasters, Independence Days, shared victories, shared losses. It builds identity from common ground even when that ground has been shaken. But here's the subtle truth. Collective memory is not the same as collective fact. It's not a perfect recording of history. It's a blend of remembrance, emotion, and meaning. The past filtered through what a society chooses to honor, to repeat, or to forget. It's selective, constructed, and often deeply symbolic. For example, different communities may remember the same event in radically different ways. One group may recall a liberation, another a loss. One nation may celebrate a turning point, another may mourn it. That's because collective memory isn't built on what happened, it's built on how it felt and how it's told. And how it's told depends on who has the microphone. Leaders, educators, media, elders, these are the architects of collective memory. They decide what enters textbooks, what becomes a national holiday, what is whispered over graves or sung in stadiums. They shape what children grow up believing is important. And that's a powerful thing. Over time, these memories crystallize into identity. They affect how we see ourselves, who we think we are, who we think others are. They form the we in our stories. But collective memory can also carry silence. Some histories are buried, some voices go unheard, some events are omitted intentionally or not. And that silence, too, becomes memory. A ghost in the room, a blank page where something should be. This is why uncovering forgotten histories matters, restoring erased narratives, listening to those who were never asked to speak. The way a society remembers or forgets shapes not just its past, but its future. It determines how we teach children, how we build communities, how we empathize or don't. It explains why some wounds stay open for generations, and why healing sometimes requires not forgetting, but remembering honestly. There's a profound beauty in shared remembrance. Think of a grandmother telling a war story, a monument standing in a quiet square, a poem recited at the same hour each year. These are more than performances. They are inheritance. Memory passed not genetically but emotionally, socially, spiritually. Even digital culture is building its own form of collective memory. Hashtags that trend during global events, memes that encapsulate emotion, online archives that preserve voices and faces. Our collective memory is no longer just oral or written, it's visual, viral, and shared at light speed. But amidst all this, one truth remains: memory is not just what we keep, it's what we pass on. To remember as a society is to say, we were here. This mattered. We are shaped by this. Whether carved in stone or sung across generations, collective memory keeps the thread from unraveling. In our next chapter, we'll turn to education, specifically how memory works in learning. What strategies help us retain knowledge? How does the classroom, formal or informal, become a space where memory is shaped, stretched, and stored? But for now, take a quiet moment to reflect on the stories you've inherited, the ones that weren't just yours, but ours, the ones you didn't live but feel anyway. They live in you for a reason. Learning is memory in motion. Every lesson, every insight, every aha moment, it only matters if it finds a place to live inside you. And that place is memory. Whether you're studying for an exam, practicing a new language, or just trying to remember where you left your coffee mug, the process is the same. Your brain is capturing, storing, retrieving, over and over again. But here's the gentle truth. The brain doesn't remember what you simply hear. It remembers what you connect to. That's why the best learning doesn't begin with information. It begins with curiosity, with attention, with emotion. The moment something feels relevant, surprising, delightful, or deeply you, your brain leans in and listens. This is why the most effective teaching isn't about cramming facts. It's about building stories, patterns, meaning. It's why a passionate teacher makes all the difference. They don't just give you data, they give you context. They tie the new to the familiar. They light the path between what you didn't know and what you suddenly understand. And memory, in turn, rewards that process. When you learn something new, your brain creates a fragile network of connections. These are like threads of a spiderweb, delicate, easily broken. But with repetition, retrieval, engagement, those threads thicken. They become pathways, highways, automatic. That's how knowledge becomes second nature, not through memorization alone, but through use. So, how does memory best support learning? Spaced repetition is one of the most powerful techniques. Instead of trying to memorize everything in one sitting, which usually leads to rapid forgetting, you revisit the material at gradually increasing intervals. This mirrors how memory naturally decays and how it can be rescued just before it disappears. Each review strengthens the connection. Each return reinforces the learning. Retrieval practice is another quiet powerhouse. Instead of rereading notes endlessly, you try to recall what you know. That little mental strain, that effort to remember, is where the magic happens. It's like lifting a slightly heavy weight for your brain. You're not just testing memory, you're building it. Teaching others is an advanced form of retrieval. When you explain a concept out loud, you're forced to organize your thoughts, fill in gaps, clarify the fog. And that clarity doesn't just help the listener, it deepens your own understanding. Then there's multisensory learning. When more than one sense is engaged, sight, sound, touch, memory becomes richer. That's why diagrams help, why singing the alphabet works, why writing something down makes it more real. Each added sense adds another hook, another anchor. But the secret sauce in all learning is still emotion. When something feels meaningful, the brain marks it. That's why you remember how you felt after understanding a hard concept, or why you recall a story your teacher once told, even if the fact itself faded. Emotion makes memory sticky. Sleep, too, is vital. Without sleep, your brain can't consolidate what you've learned. It's like trying to print a document without saving it first. Even a short nap after learning can dramatically improve recall. Sleep is where memory breathes and solidifies. And finally, mistakes. Yes, mistakes are part of how we remember. Getting something wrong, then learning the correct answer, builds stronger memory than simply reading the right answer from the start. Why? Because the contrast sticks. The emotional sting of almost but not quite sharpens the edge of understanding. So don't fear failure in learning. It's one of memory's most loyal teachers. Education isn't just about storing facts, it's about building frameworks. Structures you can add to over time. The more connections a new idea has, the more easily it settles into your memory. That's why lifelong learners don't just know more. They know how to learn. Their minds are gardens with rich soil ready to grow whatever seed is planted next. So if you're trying to remember something, an equation, a name, a concept, don't just repeat it. Relate to it. Ask why it matters. Say it aloud. Draw it. Quiz yourself. Sleep on it. Teach it. Laugh about it. Tell a story about it. Use the whole orchestra of your brain, and most of all, be kind to yourself. Because forgetting is not failure. It's part of the cycle. It's the space that lets remembering begin again. It's what keeps memory alive, fragile, human, beautiful. This brings us to the close of our quiet journey. We've wandered through the maze of memory, through seahorse-shaped structures in your brain, through flashbulbs and false starts, through smells and songs and stories passed from hand to hand. We've seen how memory forms not only who you are, but who we are. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember this not because of the facts, but because something here made you feel. The science of memory is vast. But in the end, it comes down to something very small. What do you choose to hold on to, and what will you gently let go? Sleep well, traveler. Your memories are safe tonight. Not all memories arrive gently. Some don't whisper. They haunt. They return when you least expect them. Not as stories, but as flashes, fragments, feelings that seem to live in the body long after the mind has tried to move on. These are traumatic memories, and they don't follow the usual rules. Trauma changes how memory is made. It doesn't just scar the mind, it reshapes how the brain encodes, stores, and retrieves experience. While most memories are woven into coherent narratives, traumatic ones are often disorganized, disconnected, more like a storm trapped in a jar than a story told with a beginning, middle, and end. That's because trauma doesn't happen in thinking mode. It happens in survival mode. When you experience extreme stress or fear, your brain floods with stress hormones, especially cortisol and adrenaline. The amygdala, your emotion center, becomes hyperactive. It tags everything with urgency. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, which helps organize memory into time and place, slows down. It can't make proper files. The result: bits and pieces, sensory snapshots, frozen moments. This is why people with trauma often say, it doesn't feel like a memory. It feels like it's happening again. And in many ways, the brain agrees. The memory isn't just recalled, it's relived. The heart races, muscles tense, breathing changes. The body speaks even when the mind stays silent. That's the difference between an ordinary painful memory and a traumatic one. One fades, the other stays alive, and not always by choice. These memories can be triggered not by intent, but by association. A smell, a sound, a season, a phrase. The brain ever vigilant links that cue to the unresolved memory. It lights up the old network, sends the whole system back into fight or flight. Not because it's broken, but because it thinks it's protecting you. But over time, this protection can become a prison. You begin to fear your own memories, avoid places, people, or emotions that feel too close. You shrink your world to stay safe. And memory, once a map of your life, becomes a minefield. Yet even here, the brain has capacity for healing. Trauma doesn't erase your ability to make new memories. It doesn't steal your future. It just interrupts the way your past is organized. And through careful, compassionate work therapy, reflection, safety, those fragmented memories can begin to find shape, form, integration. Treatments like EMDR, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing, and trauma-focused CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy work by helping the brain reprocess traumatic memories, not to forget them, but to store them differently, to move them from raw sensory flashbacks into narrative memory, to let them become part of your story, not your cage. Writing too can help. So can art, movement, breath, anything that helps the body feel safe while the brain gently revisits what hurt. Memory needs room, it needs rhythm, it needs permission to be felt but not feared, and support matters more than anything. Trauma may isolate, but healing doesn't happen alone. Safe relationships allow the nervous system to settle, to learn slowly that the past is not the present, that the memory is not the moment. And in time, even painful memories can soften. They don't vanish, they don't become pretty, but they lose their sharp edge. They become part of you without overwhelming you, like scar tissue, tender but no longer raw. In our next chapter, we'll explore the other side of memory's fragility, amnesia, what happens when memory is lost entirely, whether suddenly or slowly, and how the brain copes with the blank spaces left behind. But for now, if your memories hurt, know this: your brain was doing its best to protect you. And even now, it's still trying to heal. You are not broken. You are remembering the way a survivor does with strength, even when it trembles. Most of the time, memory fades gently. A name slips away. A childhood street becomes harder to picture. You forget where you left your keys, but not who you are. But sometimes memory doesn't just fade. It vanishes. Entire hours, days, years. A person wakes up and finds a blank space where their life should be. This is amnesia, the sudden silence in the story of the self. Amnesia isn't one thing. It's a term that describes a range of memory disruptions, and the causes can be as varied as their effects. Head injuries, infections, trauma, alcohol abuse, certain medications, even psychological distress so profound that the mind chooses to disconnect rather than record. There are two main types: retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of past memories. It's like waking up and not remembering your own history. Sometimes only a few hours are missing. Other times it stretches back years. In some cases, people forget who they are entirely, but more often they lose specific stretches of time. The accident, the breakup, the trauma. Memory doesn't disappear evenly. It frays. Anterograde amnesia, on the other hand, affects the making of new memories. The past may be intact, but the present can't stick. New information never quite settles in. The moment slips away before it can be stored. This form is often seen in cases of severe brain injury or damage to the hippocampus, the brain's memory gateway. Without that gateway functioning, experience flows in and right back out. Perhaps the most famous case of anterograde amnesia is Henry Molaison, known for decades as HM. After surgery to treat his epilepsy, parts of his hippocampus were removed. He could remember childhood family and events from long ago, but could not form any new episodic memories. He met people, had conversations, and minutes later forgot them entirely. His life became a loop, a present without past or future. Amnesia reminds us of something humbling. Memory is not guaranteed. The self, your sense of continuity of identity, relies on memory far more than we realize. When memory fractures, so does the narrative we use to understand who we are. But the brain, ever adaptable, finds workarounds. People with amnesia often retain implicit memory, the kind you don't have to think about. They can still ride a bike, play an instrument, learn new motor skills. They may not remember learning, but the learning is there. This shows us that memory is not stored in one place. It's distributed, layered, flexible. Even in retrograde amnesia, emotional memory sometimes survives. A person may not recall why they love a song, but still feel warmth when they hear it, or recoil at the sight of something without remembering the trauma behind it. The feeling lingers even when the facts are gone. There's also transient global amnesia, a rare but fascinating condition where a person suddenly loses the ability to form new memories for a few hours, then gradually recovers with no lasting damage. It's like memory slips on a patch of ice, then slowly gets up again. No one knows exactly why it happens. Stress, physical exertion, or even temperature shock are suspected triggers. In some rare cases, psychogenic amnesia occurs memory loss with no detectable physical cause. Often tied to emotional trauma, the mind may block out a specific memory or identity as a form of self-preservation. These cases challenge our understanding of where memory lives in the brain, yes, but also in emotion, story, and identity. Amnesia, like trauma, teaches us that forgetting is not always failure. Sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's injury, sometimes it's simply the delicate machinery of memory misfiring under pressure. And recovery. It varies. Some memories return gradually, triggered by familiar places, smells, or voices. Others never return. But new memories can still be made even if the past is incomplete. The brain doesn't wait for perfection to move forward. It keeps going, rebuilding. Living with memory loss, whether your own or a loved one's, requires patience, creativity, and compassion. It's not just about recovery. It's about finding meaning in what remains, holding on to presence even when the past has gone quiet. In the next chapter, we'll explore a phenomenon that feels almost magical. Photographic memory. Does it exist? And if so, how does it work? But for now, if you've ever feared forgetting or mourned a memory that slipped away, know this: you are more than what you remember. And even in the absence of memory, there is still presence, still feeling, still you. We've all heard the phrase, "she has a photographic memory." It conjures up images of someone flipping through textbooks once and remembering everything. Perfect recall, instant playback, like having a camera in your brain ready to print snapshots on demand. But how real is this? Does photographic memory actually exist? The answer, like many things in neuroscience, is complicated. Let's begin with what we do know. There's something called eidetic memory, which is most commonly observed in young children. A child with eidetic memory can look at an image for a few seconds, then describe it in vivid detail even after it's removed. Colors, shapes, placement. They may see the image in their mind's eye as if it's still there. But there's a catch: this ability almost always fades with age. By adulthood, true eidetic memory is extremely rare, if it exists at all. And even in children, it's not photographic in the sense of permanently storing everything. It's more like an extended afterimage, brief, visual, and often partial. So what about adults who claim to have photographic memory? There are people who demonstrate astonishing memory abilities. They can memorize entire pages of text, recall long strings of numbers, replay visual scenes in extraordinary detail. But in almost every studied case, these feats are the result of training strategy or intense focus, not an innate camera in the brain. Memory champions, for example, use complex mnemonics, visual imagery, and the method of loci memory palaces to encode and retrieve information rapidly. Their brains aren't superhuman, they're disciplined. What looks like photographic recall is often the product of thousands of hours of practice. Then there's highly superior autobiographical memory, HSAM, a rare condition where individuals can recall nearly every day of their lives with astonishing clarity. Ask them what they were doing on June 12, 2003, and they can tell you what they wore, what they ate, what was on TV. But even this isn't photographic memory. It's autobiographical. They remember personal experiences, not arbitrary facts. And interestingly, their brain structures, especially the amygdala and caudate nucleus, show unique activity patterns compared to the general population. But here's the nuance. People with HSAM still forget where they left their keys. They still make mistakes. Their memory isn't flawless. It's just deeply personal and emotionally anchored. So why does the myth of photographic memory persist? Because we want it to. It's a tantalizing idea that some people can absorb and retain effortlessly what the rest of us struggle to recall. It offers a kind of mental magic in a world full of forgetfulness. But the science suggests that even the most remarkable memory abilities are grounded in effort, strategy, and perhaps most importantly, interest. When we care deeply about something, we tend to remember it better. Passion sharpens focus. Focus deepens encoding. and emotion glues memory in place. That's not photography, it's attention, meaning, and repetition. Memory isn't about storing everything, it's about storing what matters. And ironically, people with the best memory skills know this. They don't try to memorize everything, they decide what's worth remembering. They build systems, use associations, engage their senses. They partner with their memory rather than expecting it to be flawless. So to answer the question, is photographic memory real? Probably not in the Hollywood sense. There's no solid scientific evidence that anyone can look at a scene once and recall it perfectly forever without effort. But there are extraordinary memory abilities, and they can be nurtured, trained, and expanded. In the next chapter, we'll return to something closer to home, the emotional weight of memory, why some memories feel heavier than others, and how nostalgia, regret, and longing shape our relationship with the past. But for now, if you've ever wished for a photographic memory, remember this. You don't need to capture everything. You just need to notice deeply. And sometimes one honest, imperfect memory is more powerful than 1,000 flawless ones. Some memories don't just linger. They live in us. Not because we want them to, or because we keep replaying them, but because they arrived wearing too much emotion to simply fade. A look, a sentence, a silence. And suddenly, years later, they still hum under the surface. Memory isn't measured only in how clearly we recall something. It's measured in weight, the emotional gravity a moment carries. And the heavier it is, the harder it is to let go. But what gives a memory weight? It begins with emotion. The more emotionally intense a moment is, whether it's joy, pain, shame, wonder, the more likely your brain is to prioritize it. The amygdala lights up. It taps the hippocampus on the shoulder and says, "Mark this, it matters." And because of that collaboration, the memory is encoded more deeply, more vividly, more permanently. But it doesn't stop there. Repetition, especially mental repetition, adds weight too. Every time you revisit a memory, you reinforce it. You trace the neural pathway again. And depending on how you interpret that memory each time, you may even add more emotion to it. That's why a regret can grow heavier with years, and why a moment of pride remembered often becomes a touchstone for self-worth. But weight isn't just about intensity, it's also about meaning. Some memories feel heavier because they carry pieces of our identity. A conversation that changed your direction, a loss that redefined your understanding of love, a moment you failed and couldn't forget. These aren't just events, they're anchors. They hold together the story you tell yourself about who you are. That's why nostalgia can feel so sweet, it hurts. And why regret can show up uninvited in quiet rooms. The memory isn't neutral. It's weighted with meaning, what might have been, what was lost, what mattered more than you realized at the time. Even sensory cues can make the weight resurface. A certain smell, a melody, a taste. And suddenly, you're not just thinking about the past, you're back inside it. Your breath changes, your mood shifts. The weight returns not as a thought, but as a feeling. But not all heavy memories are burdens. Some are sacred, the birth of a child, the last words of a loved one, a moment of deep connection. These memories ground us. They're not always joyful, but they're meaningful. They remind us we've lived, that we've been open, that we've felt fully. So what do we do with these weighted memories? We tend to them. We recognize that they're part of us, but they don't have to define us. That regret doesn't need to be replayed every night. That beautiful moments don't need to be clung to in fear of forgetting. That pain remembered can become wisdom shared. When we give memory space through writing, through conversation, through stillness, it becomes lighter. Not smaller, but less sharp, less heavy. Memory doesn't want to be locked away. It wants to be integrated. Given a home, not a cage. And sometimes just naming the weight helps carry it. Saying this mattered to me is an act of release. In the next chapter, we'll explore something even more elusive, memory and the imagination. How what we imagine can become entangled with what we remember, and how memory, far from being static, is shaped by the stories we keep telling ourselves. But for now, if there's a memory you're carrying tonight, one that hasn't faded, one that still echoes, breathe with it. Let it rest. Let it exist without judgment. Some moments never leave us, and maybe they're not supposed to. Close your eyes and try to remember your childhood bedroom. You can probably picture the furniture, the colors, maybe the sound of rain hitting the window. But pause for a second. How much of what you're remembering is memory, and how much is imagination? This is where things get beautifully blurred. Memory and imagination are not opposites, they are neighbors. They live in the same mental neighborhood, borrow each other's metaphors, and sometimes even share the same rooms in the brain. Neuroscience shows that when you recall a memory and when you imagine a future event, your brain activates strikingly similar regions, especially the medial temporal lobe, prefrontal cortex, and default mode network. That means when you remember something, you're not simply pulling a file from a cabinet. You're reconstructing, assembling fragments, filling in gaps, and smoothing over the rough edges. And your imagination. It's often the one providing the missing pieces. This explains why memories can feel vivid and true even if they're partially invented. You might remember someone wearing a green sweater when they never did, or that a conversation happened at sunset even though it took place under fluorescent lights. Your mind isn't lying. It's storytelling. It's trying to make the memory whole. This blending of memory and imagination is called constructive memory. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. It allows your brain to be flexible, to use the past to predict the future, to draw from memory to create art, make decisions right. Fiction, invent, daydream. Imagination also fills in emotional gaps. When a memory is incomplete, when someone you loved disappears from your life, you may imagine what they would have said, how they would have looked at you. You may invent the ending of a story you never got to finish. This imagined closure becomes part of your memory, not because it's accurate, but because it's necessary. The mind weaves comfort where reality left a tear. And sometimes imagination creates memories that feel as strong as real ones. Think of a novel that changed you, a film that left a mark, a dream you woke up from in tears. These imagined experiences are stored using the same emotional and sensory systems as real ones. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between lived and vividly imagined, especially when emotion is involved. This is why visualization is such a powerful learning tool. When you imagine yourself practicing a skill, speaking in public, or even healing from something painful, your brain rehearses the experience. And those mental rehearsals form real neural pathways. Athletes, musicians, and performers know this. So do monks and meditators. Imagination teaches the brain sometimes more gently than experience ever could. But there's a shadow side too. Imagination can distort memory. When you revisit a memory, often especially with strong emotions, you may accidentally overwrite it with imagined detail. Over time, you remember the version you've told yourself, not the version that happened. This is how stories evolve, and sometimes how false memories form. It's also why people can come to believe deeply in things they only imagined once, especially if the imagined version provides comfort, or clarity, or a sense of control. The mind seeks coherence, and imagination helps fill in the blanks. So, what does this mean for us? It means we should approach memory with both reverence and humility. We are not recording devices, we are meaning makers, curators, editors, and sometimes authors of memories that were never fully real but deeply emotionally true. It also means that imagination can be a tool for healing, for re-authoring painful narratives, for imagining better outcomes, not to escape the past, but to reframe it, to make peace, to soften what once felt sharp. Memory isn't just about what was, it's also about what we believe was. And sometimes, that belief is the more important part. In the next chapter, we'll explore memory in the digital age, how modern technology is changing the way we store, access, and even outsource our memories. But for now, let yourself drift between what you know and what you've imagined. That space in between, that's where your inner storyteller lives, and sometimes what you imagine becomes the memory that holds you. We used to keep memories in our minds. Now we keep them in clouds, in phones, in timelines and photo reels, reminders, and bookmarks. A conversation from 5 years ago isn't something we try to remember, it's something we search. We no longer ask, "Do you remember?" We say, "Let me check." This is the age of external memory, and it's changing not just how we remember, but what we remember, and even who we think we are. Our brains have always relied on tools, writing storytelling songs, to help carry the burden of memory. But now that externalization is constant, ubiquitous, seamless. Our phones remember birthdays, calendars, remember appointments. Google remembers facts, and our cameras remember moments we didn't even fully experience while living them. This shift has given rise to a term, digital amnesia. It refers to the phenomenon of forgetting information simply because we know a device will remember it for us. The brain, ever efficient, offloads what it deems non-essential. Why memorize directions when GPS will do it better? Why retain phone numbers when your contacts list never forgets? But while digital tools have lightened our cognitive load, they've also changed the shape of our mental landscape. Transactive memory, once shared among groups of people like a family where one person remembers dates, another handles directions, is now often shared between person and device. Your smartphone becomes your second brain, a reliable, tireless assistant. But the relationship isn't neutral, it's reshaping memory itself. Research shows that when people expect to have future access to information, like being able to look it up, they remember less of the information itself and more about how to find it. The memory shifts from store and recall to locate and retrieve. We remember the path, not the content, but memory is more than storage. It's meaning, connection, identity. And here's where the digital age gets complicated. We capture everything, but remember less. We photograph meals, concerts, sunsets, but often engage less with the experience in the moment. Our devices don't just record memories, they sometimes replace them. The act of documenting can pull us away from the feeling. We look back later and ask, was I really there? This phenomenon, known as the photo-taking impairment effect, suggests that the more we rely on cameras to record our lives, the less deeply we encode those moments ourselves. The lens becomes a layer between us and the present. Beautiful memories get flattened into content. At the same time, digital memory allows for preservation on a scale never before possible. Generations from now, someone might watch a video of your laugh, read your thoughts, see your world exactly as you lived it. The idea of memory as legacy has changed. We are all archivists now, but we're also curators. What we choose to post, delete, share, or hide shapes our digital autobiographies. Social media doesn't just reflect memory, it influences it. Posts reappear as on-this-day reminders. Memories are algorithmically resurfaced, sometimes with warmth, and sometimes when we least want them. The timeline becomes a mirror we didn't ask to look into. And what about privacy? Our memories are increasingly public, stored in servers vulnerable to breaches shaped by platforms we don't fully control. We've handed fragments of our lives to machines not just for safekeeping, but for distribution. Our digital memory is searchable, permanent, and in some ways no longer ours alone. Still, there's beauty here too. People with memory loss can revisit old photos and voices. Families can preserve legacies across generations. A moment of joy once fleeting can be rewatched again and again. Technology, when used with care, can become a memory prosthetic, a bridge between who we are and who we've been. But it must be used with intention, because memory isn't just about having information, it's about feeling it, living in it, being shaped by it. So ask yourself, what do you truly remember and what have you only recorded? In the next chapter, we'll return to the core of the self-autobiographical memory, how your brain stitches together the story of your life and what happens when the narrative begins to shift. But for now, take a moment away from screens. Let memory be quiet, imperfect, yours. The cloud remembers everything, but your heart remembers differently. You are a story you've been telling yourself for as long as you've been conscious. Not a perfectly written one, not a flawless memoir, but a living, breathing narrative stitched together from memories. And that story, That's your autobiographical memory. It's how you make sense of your life, of who you were, who you are, and who you might become. Autobiographical memory isn't about remembering every detail. It's about forming identity, a coherent sense of self stretched across time. It links your present self to the child you once were and the future self you imagine becoming. It says, I've been through this. I've learned from that. I remember who I am. It's deeply personal, deeply selective, and deeply emotional. You don't store your life chronologically. You store it thematically. A series of moments, formative, emotional, meaningful, clustered around who you believe yourself to be. Maybe you remember being the quiet one, the survivor, the helper. And the memories that support that belief get recalled more often, reinforced, rewoven. The rest, they may fade, or feel like they belong to someone else entirely. This is why two people can live through the same event and come away with completely different memories. Because we don't just remember what happened, we remember what it meant to us. And meaning is shaped by emotion, by context, by the stories we were already telling ourselves when the event occurred. At the core of autobiographical memory is the self-reference effect. Your brain is more likely to remember information when it relates directly to you, when you see yourself in it, when it feels personal. That's why facts fade, but feelings last. That's why a simple comment made in passing can echo for decades, because your mind interpreted it as part of your story. And your story isn't static, it evolves. As you change, so does your memory. You reinterpret the past through the lens of who you are now. What once felt like failure may later feel like transformation. What once felt like joy might carry bitterness in hindsight. Memory isn't just recall, it's revision. Each time you remember, you're reauthoring the past just a little. But sometimes, the story can falter. In depression, autobiographical memory can become overgeneralized. Instead of recalling vivid, specific events, the mind defaults to vague summaries. I always mess up. I was never good enough. The rich texture of experience blurs into a gray narrative of shame or helplessness. The details are still there, but access to them becomes fogged by mood. In trauma, the timeline can shatter completely. Events get stored out of sequence. Context dissolves. A memory becomes untethered, floating outside the story you're trying to tell yourself. This disintegration of narrative is deeply disorienting, not because of the memory itself, but because it disrupts identity. And in dementia, autobiographical memory can erode from both ends, the distant past and the recent. People lose their thread. They may no longer know their own name, but often, even when facts are gone, emotion remains. A song may bring tears. A photo may evoke a smile. The self, though fraying, still flickers. But here's the gentle power of this kind of memory. It can be reshaped. Therapy journaling conversations, even storytelling exercises, can help people reconstruct their autobiographical narrative in healthier ways, not by fabricating, but by reframing, by finding new angles, by locating strength in survival, humor in chaos, grace in regret. We are not trapped by our memories. We are in conversation with them. And every time you tell your story, whether aloud or silently, you are strengthening certain neural pathways, reinforcing the identity you carry forward. You are both the author and the protagonist. So what does this mean for everyday life? It means your memories matter not just as records of the past, but as foundations of the self. The stories you choose to revisit shape your mood, your motivation, your relationships. They shape how you forgive, how you grow, how you dream. In the next chapter, we'll step into the quiet process of forgetting not as failure, but as function. Why the brain lets go, and why sometimes forgetting is as vital as remembering. But for now, ask yourself, what stories do you tell about yourself, and which ones are you ready to revise? Because your memory isn't just your past, it's your becoming. We often treat forgetting like a failure, an error, a flaw in the system. We say, I can't believe I forgot, as if memory should be perfect. But forgetting is not a glitch. It's not the opposite of memory. It's part of how memory works. It's how the brain keeps itself light enough to keep going. If remembering is the art of holding on, forgetting is the wisdom of letting go. Your brain is exposed to tens of thousands of pieces of information every single day: faces, names, sounds, notifications, worries, impressions. If it tried to keep everything, it would drown in detail. Instead, the brain chooses. It selects what's meaningful, what's useful, what's emotional. The rest, it quietly fades. This isn't a weakness, it's efficiency. Forgetting is a filter. It allows important memories to stand out, while irrelevant ones disappear into background noise. The texture of a sidewalk you walked 10 years ago, the name of a stranger you spoke to once, a grocery list from last Tuesday. You don't need them anymore, and so your brain releases them. This process is governed by synaptic pruning. Think of it like gardening. Your brain trims unused connections to allow stronger ones to grow. The more you revisit a memory, the more you reinforce it. The less you engage it, the more likely it is to fade. It's not destruction, it's design. But forgetting isn't always passive. Sometimes we want to forget. A painful moment, a cruel word, a regret that sits too heavy. And yet trying to force forgetting is tricky. The more we try not to think of something, the more it clings. This is known as the ironic process theory, where suppression leads to fixation. The classic "don't think about a white bear" effect. Still, over time, even sharp memories can soften. The emotional charge dulls. The details blur. This is often a sign that healing is underway. Your brain is not erasing the event, it's reclassifying it, moving it from a wound to a scar. And some forgetting is necessary for learning. In education and creativity, unlearning allows for growth. Letting go of outdated ideas makes space for better ones. Changing your mind requires forgetting the shape of an old belief. Even language learners must forget certain speech patterns to adopt new ones. Forgetting in these cases is progress. There's also adaptive forgetting, where your brain intentionally limits access to certain memories to reduce cognitive overload. Imagine trying to make a decision, but remembering every similar moment you've ever experienced. You'd freeze. Forgetting helps you focus on the present rather than drowning in the past. Even in grief, forgetting plays a role. The initial pain of loss is overwhelming because memory is so active. Every room, every object, every song triggers something. But as time passes, those triggers become softer. The memories don't disappear, but they take up less space. Forgetting helps you live forward, not just backward. But what about the memories we don't want to lose? A face, a voice, a phrase someone used to say. These too fade over time, not because they weren't important, but because memory is always in motion. Even precious moments need care to be kept. That's why we write, speak, revisit, share. Memory needs practice to endure. Yet we must also allow forgetting to do its quiet work. You're not meant to remember everything. You're meant to remember enough to move with meaning, enough to love, to grow, to learn, to adapt. Forgetting isn't absence, it's space. It's the pause between the notes that lets the music breathe. In the next chapter, we'll explore something deeply emotional and often unspoken: grief and memory. How memory keeps those we've lost close, and how remembering becomes an act of love. But for now, let yourself forget a little. Let the pressure to hold on to everything fall away. You are not less for forgetting. You are more free. When someone you love is gone, they don't vanish completely. They stay. In echoes, in fragments, in the quiet ways memory refuses to let go. A scent, a song, a certain slant of afternoon light. And suddenly there they are, again, not in body, but in presence. This is grief through memory. Not just sadness, not just longing, but the continued dialogue between a heart that remembers and a world that has moved on. Grief doesn't ask if you want to remember. It brings memory forward, often unexpectedly. You might be making tea, walking through a grocery aisle, folding laundry, and there it is. A flash, a voice, a day you thought you'd forgotten. Grief is memory that refuses to stay silent. And that's not weakness. It's love looking for somewhere to land. When we lose someone, our brain must reconcile the contradiction they are gone, and yet so present. The hippocampus and amygdala. The brain's memory and emotion centers continue lighting up in response to memories of the person as if they were still near. In many ways they are, not physically, but neurologically, emotionally, spiritually. Memory becomes a form of relational continuity. It keeps the bond alive. It says, you mattered. And that in itself is a kind of comfort. But grief memory is rarely tidy. Some memories come with warmth, others with sharpness. You may cherish the way they laughed and ache over the way you argued. Grief doesn't choose only the good. It brings the whole tapestry, the joy, the regret, the unfinished conversations. Over time, the texture of these memories changes. In early grief, memories can feel like ambushes, sudden, overwhelming. But slowly, with gentleness and time, they soften. They become visits, reminders, even companions. The pain doesn't vanish, but it becomes part of your story, not the whole of it. And here's something quietly powerful remembering is healing. Telling stories, looking at photos, saying their name out loud. These acts of memory are not clinging, they are honoring. The more you remember them in ways that feel meaningful, the more their presence becomes integrated into your life, not as something lost, but as something that still lives in a different form. Even rituals help. Lighting a candle, cooking their favorite meal, walking a path you used to share. These aren't just symbolic, they're neurological. They reinforce memory through repetition, through sensory experience. They let the brain revisit in safety. And for those worried about forgetting, you won't. Not entirely. Yes, the sharpness fades, the exact sound of their voice, the shape of their hands. But something deeper remains, a felt sense. The way you knew them, the way they made you feel. These are encoded not just in neurons, but in who you've become. Grief reshapes memory, but memory also reshapes grief. You don't move on from loss, you move forward with it. And memory becomes the bridge, the way love continues even without presence, the way a life carries on in quiet gestures, habits, phrases passed down like heirlooms. In some cultures, the dead are never truly gone. They live on through stories, through remembrance. They are ancestors, not absences. Memory becomes a sacred act, a way of keeping someone close without holding them back. So if you are grieving and remembering, know this: it's okay to feel both joy and sorrow in the same breath, to laugh at an old memory with tears in your eyes, to miss someone deeply and still let yourself live fully. That's not contradiction. That's grief in balance. In the final chapter of our journey, we'll bring everything together, memory as meaning. Why, in the end, what we choose to remember may be the most powerful force shaping who we are. But for now, if someone you loved lives only in memory, now pause. Let them be near, not gone, just remembered. Once upon a time, memory lived only in the mind. It was passed through stories carried in wrinkles and lullabies, written in letters carved into stone. But today, memory has expanded. It floats in clouds, hums in servers, replays on screens. And tomorrow, memory might not just be stored, it might be shared, edited, even engineered. This is the future of memory, and it's closer than you think. Already we are living in a world where forgetting has become optional. Our photos are backed up in 10 different places. Our conversations live in endless archives. Our past, once fragile, once fleeting, is now retrievable with a swipe, a keyword, a scroll. We are no longer just remembering, we are recording. But that shift comes with questions. What happens when we can no longer forget? When every mistake, every version of ourselves, every echo of grief and joy lives forever in digital amber? When we can revisit our past in such detail that it never truly becomes past? In many ways, we are already building external brains. Search engines, smart assistants, wearables that track our sleep, our stress, our patterns, algorithms that know what we've read, watched, listened to, even what we might want to feel next. These systems don't just help us remember, they shape what we pay attention to, what we revisit, what we relearn. And soon, memory might not even need to be remembered at all. Neurotechnology is already exploring how to enhance memory or even restore it. Brain-computer interfaces like those developed by Neuralink and other researchers aim to read neural signals directly, potentially recording memories, replaying them, or transferring them between devices. The idea of uploading a memory, once pure science fiction, is now an active area of scientific inquiry. But memory is more than data. A memory isn't just a collection of facts, it's how it felt, where it lived in your body, what it meant in that moment. Can a neural file capture the ache of a goodbye, the awe of first snowfall, the hush in a room when someone says your name like it's the only one they know? If we can record everything, should we? There's beauty in the ephemeral. There's value in forgetting. It lets us heal, lets us grow, lets us reshape the past into something we can live with. A future where nothing is ever lost might also be one where nothing is ever allowed to change. And what about identity? If memories can be transferred, whose memory is it? If you relive someone else's childhood, do you become a part of it? When does memory stop being personal and start being shared consciousness? These are questions we'll need to ask not just as scientists, but as humans. Even our collective memory is changing. With artificial intelligence, we can create memories of things that never happened: hyperreal simulations, voice replications, even video fabrications. The boundary between memory and imagination, always thin, is dissolving even more. And yet, in the face of all this, the heart of memory remains the same. A hand traced on paper, a favorite song hummed under breath, a story passed at the dinner table, a quiet thought at midnight. I remember you. The future of memory may be vast, digital, even downloadable. But its meaning, its power, will still come from the same place it always has: connection, emotion, the fragile human desire to hold on to what matters. So, what will we carry forward? We'll carry the feeling of being seen, of being remembered, of remembering ourselves not as perfect data, but as stories, as moments, as breath. And as this journey comes to an end, take a moment to reflect not on all the facts you've learned, but on the feelings that rose along the way. The soft awe of how your brain protects you, the recognition in how you reframe your past, the grace in knowing you're allowed to forget and still be whole. Because in the end, memory isn't about keeping everything. It's about keeping what keeps you human.